We're on the record in the matter of encroachment permit application number ERL-95-S-1378, B as in boy. The applicant is North Idaho Maritime. My name is Chris Bromley. I'm a private attorney serving today as the hearing coordinator in this proceeding. Today is Thursday, July 23rd, 2020, and the time is shortly after 6 p.m. Pacific time. The public hearing today is being conducted both in person and via Zoom. I'm physically located in Boise. Some of you are appearing on your own Zoom connection, while others of you are present at Lanz's office in Coeur d'Alene. Before I open the hearing for comment, I would like to ask Chris Gozo with Idaho Department of Lands just to give a brief tutorial on how to use Zoom. So Chris?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bromley. Let me go ahead and share out a screenshot here. Okay, and is everybody able to see that? Let me know if you are. For those connected to Zoom, for those connected to the phone, it won't be applicable, but just those connected directly into Zoom, I'm just going to talk about some basic controls. So can everybody see that? Okay. So essentially, in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom window when you're connected, there's a mute button that you can use to mute and unmute during the calls. So especially during the start of meetings when, to eliminate background noise and before anybody's speaking, we like to stay on mute. And with Zoom, there's a feature that if you are muted, you can actually press the space bar to temporarily unmute and speak, sort of a push to talk, and then let go, and then you'll be muted again. Or you can manually press the button. If you don't see this bar across the bottom either, just move your mouse to the bottom and that bar will pop up. And then that'll give you your mute controls. And the other key control we're looking at is the chat function as well. When you click on the chat button, you'll see a chat screen pop up to the right, and then you'll see all the chat messages for the meeting. When we go to take public comment, we'll ask people to message Andrew Smith directly in the chat window. So as you can see that I've highlighted next to 2, it says everyone, and there's a drop down where you can click the drop down and then select Andrew, and then you can send him the message of your name and other pertinent information to go on the record. We will be, when we're taking public comment afterwards, we will be making sure that everybody on the phones had a chance to speak as well. So does anybody have any questions about Zoom usage? Okay, thank you very much.
You're muted, Mr. Bromley.
Oh, Chris, I think you're, oh, Mr. Bromley.
Yep, thank you very much. Again, we're all learning how to do this, so I appreciate somebody telling me that, and we'll work through this. So this evening, I'm facilitating a public hearing involving North Idaho Maritime's application for a commercial marina. My responsibility is to consider the application and the written record, take comment, and determine if the application meets Idaho's statutory, regulatory, and case law standards for approval. I'm then tasked by the director of the Department of Lands with issuing a preliminary order, which will be reviewed by the director, who will then issue a final order no more than 30 days after conclusion of the hearing. and that 30-day time limit is a requirement of Idaho code. Before we begin, I'd like to establish the order in which I'll take comment. And this is typical for all of these applications. So first, I'd like to hear from the applicant, North Idaho Maritime, to provide an overview of the application and offer any comments it wishes to make. Second, I will provide an opportunity for any governmental agencies other than the Department of Lands to provide comment. I don't know whether we have any governmental agencies on the phone today. I have read the written comments that I've seen filed from entities like BEQ and Fish and Game. So after the governmental entities, I will then take comment from the public who wishes to provide oral comment. And before I address the order in which I'll take that public comment, I would like each of you to know that I've read all of the comments that have been received from the Department of Lands as of 5 p.m. Mountain Time. If you previously submitted written comments and are considering oral comments, please know that I've read all of them. I provide equal weight to written and oral comments. It looks like we don't have a huge number of people on Zoom at the moment, but I would just ask you again to, if you've provided written comments, I assure you I've read them, and I will give equal weight to your written comments the same way if you gave them orally. So don't feel like you need to duplicate your comments. If they're in writing, I've seen them and am taking due consideration of them. So as to the order of public comment, if people could please be on mute while I'm speaking, we have to I can hear some music. People could please put themselves on mute. It's important because we need to record this. Thank you. So as to the order of public comment, what I'm going to first do is take comment from those persons who are physically located at the Lands Office in Coeur d'Alene. And we'll ask the coordinators of those conference rooms, Ms. Funson and Mr. Amer, to ask for comments in the order in which people signed up on the sheet of paper. So I'll ask for Ms. Funson if your room would go first, and then Mr. Amer if your room would go second. After hearing from those persons in the conference room, I will then take comments from those of you who are connected via Zoom. And as we mentioned before at the beginning, we'll take comments in the order in which names are entered into the Zoom chat box. So you're looking for the chat feature at the bottom. You'll look for, rather than selecting everyone, select Andrew Smith and enter in your name and your address or your email, some sort of contact information, so that we know who you are and that you provided comment tonight. If you have a document that you want to provide in aid of your oral comments and can't upload them right now, please just show them on the screen and get them to Lands, the Lands office, any of the Lands offices, no later than close of business on Friday. And that way they'll become part of the record. If you aren't able to put your name into the chat box, don't worry about that. After we've gotten through everybody who's put their name in, then I'll ask for any other people who aren't able to do that, and we'll get your comments in. Please know that. After all of the public comments, then I'll take comments from Department of Lands. And then finally, I will provide North Idaho Maritime an opportunity for reply and to make any closing remarks as the applicant. Because this is a public hearing in which we're taking comment, there isn't cross-examination or questioning by anyone present of North Idaho Maritime or the Department of Lands. This is just an opportunity to take comment in. So that said, I may have some questions, so don't be surprised if I do have a question or two here and there. For everyone who will be speaking, and as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, this is being recorded, and it might ultimately have to be transcribed by a court reporter into a written transcript. So in order for the court reporter to accurately transcribe oral comments, it helps for everybody to speak very clearly and try and slow down just a little bit maybe than your normal speaking cadence. I am oftentimes reminded that by court reporters when I'm appearing. So the court reporter can't transcribe hand gestures, nodding of heads, words like or uh-huh. So I might remind you to slow down or to use words like yes or no. And please know it's not an admonition toward you. It's just simply for us to be able to create a clear record so that your comments are accurately transcribed. Lastly, please remember to be respectful and courteous of others when they are speaking. It's particularly helpful to remember with some of you present via Zoom, others present at the Department of Land's office. Please remember to silence your cell phones and consider muting your Zoom connection while others are speaking. Please remember to be patient if there are any technical difficulties. We really hope that there won't be any, but that's entirely possible when we're talking about technology. For all of you who wish to provide comment, please take the time you need to speak. You know, keep in mind that there are a lot of people who probably want to speak tonight, but please take the time that you feel you need to get your comments into the record. And again, remember that if you provided them in writing, I have read them. This hearing will be a good use of everybody's time if we remember all of these general ground rules. So with that, I will open the hearing and ask North Idaho Maritime or its representative to please describe the application and provide any comments it wishes to make. Thank you.
Mr. Bromley, this is Chris Gozo. If I can interrupt 1 second, we've got one phone number, 509-994-4589 that seems to have some background noise. So if we could ask them to please mute their phone.
Okay, so the 509 area code, if you could please mute your phone, and also goes for everybody else. We do pick up quite a bit of background noise, and would appreciate it if you would please mute yourself while we're working through this record. So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem at all. So North Idaho Maritime, the floor is yours for an opening.
This is Mike Amer. I see that Rand Wickman is in the waiting room. I believe Rand is representing North Idaho Maritime. We may need to admit Rand back in.
Okay, Mike Amer, this is Chris Gozo. He's been admitted.
Hi guys, you waiting on me?
We are. Mr. Wickman, are you're on behalf of North Idaho Maritime?
Yeah, sorry about that. We lost you for some reason, so hopefully that won't happen again. So, but we'll keep plugging back in if we need to. So, good evening, Mr. Bromley. My name is Rand Wickman. For the record, I'm pleased to be representing North Idaho Maritime tonight. Chris, could you get my PowerPoint presentation up on the screen there?
Yes, that would be the document titled 2020-7-23 Dock Permit-RWP presentation.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, let me go ahead and open that, and I'll be sharing that shortly.
While we're doing that, if I could just please remind everybody again who's just recently joined to mute your phones while we're allowing North Idaho Maritime to present its comments. Thank you.
And let me know if you can see that all right.
Yep, it appears good on my end. So I'll
Great.
just get started and interrupt me if you have questions or anything like that. Again, Rand Wickman for the record, representing North Idaho Maritime tonight. We go to the next slide, Chris. Our request is for an encroachment permit. It's a commercial navigational encroachment. It includes a 10 by 50 pier, a 10 by 100 floating dock, and an 80 by 100 20-foot work area. You see the site plan there just on the left side of the screen. Next slide, please, Chris. So I'm sure the hearing coordinator is aware of this, but this is the IDAPA section that kind of is the heart and soul of the regulation here. And really it's about directing the department to look at property, protection of property, navigation, fish and wildlife habitat, those things, that those be given due consideration and weighed against the navigational or economic necessity or justification for the proposed encroachment. And it's my goal tonight to show you how we do just that. Next slide. So this is the location. You can see it in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide there. It's outlined in blue. That's the property that this is attached to. That's 107 acres. We're about, the green line represents a distance to, that's over to Tubbs Hill there, the city of Coeur d'Alene. We're a little over 6 miles from the city of Coeur d'Alene. Next slide. This zooms us in a little closer. As you can see here, again, the site's outlined in blue. To the north, you've got interstate right-of-way. To the east and south, you've got Highway 97 right-of-way. We've got the BLM boat launch to the west, about 1,000 feet. On the right-hand side of the screen, there's a campground back there. And then if you look very closely, you can see the proposed encroachment in green there, but you got to look pretty close because it's not very prominent in this scale here. We go to the next slide, please. There you can see the encroachment. Again, you'll note the blue line represents the assessor's parcel boundary. This property, the assessor, shows that we own out there under the summer pool elevation, and so the southern part of the encroachment is on our property. Or on property that's shown as in the trust ownership.
Mr. Wickman, if you could just hold right there.
Yep.
Everybody who has just recently joined the Zoom meeting, please mute your phone when you come in. We're getting feedback, and we're also trying to create a record here that we will have to potentially transcribe, and we need to keep it clean and clear. Thank you.
So continuing on here, there's actually about 24.5 acres of submerged land on the north side of the highway there. And this shows a portion of it that is, again, it's below what we think is the artificial high water mark, but certainly subject to your permitting requirements. And so, next slide, please, Chris. So this site has been used commercially for well, since a long time ago. It had the distinction of housing the Green Dolphin floating restaurant back in the 70s. That's actually an old phone book advertisement there on the right-hand side, and the bottom left is a photo of what that restaurant looked like. After the Green Dolphin, the site didn't see much use for many years, and we're looking to press it back into service with a commercial use again now. Next slide. I'd like to talk a little bit about North Idaho Maritime and their business. They are unique in northern Idaho for several reasons. One is they have been in existence on Coeur d'Alene Lake for 102 years. And so the activity that they do out there, this is not new commercial activity. It may be rearranged a little bit on Coeur d'Alene Lake, but they've been doing commercial activities on the water on Coeur d'Alene Lake for a long time. They do waterfront construction of all types. That includes dock construction, of course, and you know, other types of waterfront construction, stairs and those types of things. They are not unique in that regard. There are other dock construction companies, but what really makes North Idaho Maritime unique is the rest of the list. It's all the other things. They do environmental remediation. Just within the last few years, they helped do some remediation down in St. Mary's where they had to dredge out contaminated sediment. They do debris removal on the lake. That's removing derelict docks and other stuff that gets gathered up out there on the lake. Somebody has to do that, and it has to get removed from the lake. That's part of what North Idaho Maritime does. They do habitat improvement. They recently worked on a project where they were placing gravel to improve kokanee spawning habitat. They do shoreline stabilization. There's innumerable examples around the lake doing riprap and retaining walls and those types of things. And they're uniquely positioned in that regard with the proper equipment to be able to be placing riprap. They have a large barge and crane to be able to place riprap, and that's something that is very unique to North Idaho Maritime. They also assist with infrastructure installation and maintenance. Their North Kootenai Water and Sewer District, for example, has water intakes that occasionally need servicing that requires heavy lifting and so on. North Idaho Maritime gets the call for that. Also, when a Vista needs to run a power line under the water or service an existing line, again, it's something that North Idaho Maritime typically assists with because they can get the equipment on their barge and take them out there. Lastly, on my list here is emergency response. You may have heard that within the last couple of weeks, we had a very tragic airplane accident here. And so North Idaho Maritime is the first one on the call list for the county. They have a contract to provide this kind of assistance where they have to go out and assist with recovery operations. And in this case, they did that. And it results in, sometimes that results, in this case it did, they had to close down a boat launch for a week because that's really the only locations they had to stage their equipment and so on. And so that points to part of the need for this facility. Let's go to the next slide there, Chris, please. This is a partial client list. The public agencies that frequently use North Idaho Maritime services. As you can see, it's extensive. That's not an exhaustive list. That's a partial list of the agencies. Let's go to the next one. Next slide. These are some of the private parties, and I recognize, Mr. Bromley, you're not from here, so maybe these names don't ring a lot of bells for you, but you know, the most significant private users out there on the waterfront, you know, are using North Idaho Maritime for their waterfront needs. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the need for a proper facility. So in the past, loading and unloading of barges was done at mill sites or locations that are now commercial marinas. And those sites over time have been converted to other sites. You know, they're most commonly they're residential uses, or they are boat slips for recreational users. And for any of a myriad of reasons, those sites are no longer available for this use. And because no other sites are, Mr. Condon could see the writing on the wall and started talking to the various agencies years ago about working in an alternative site for loading of barges and that sort of thing, which is just a necessary activity on a large lake like this. And he had talked to any number of agencies, and they all agreed that the service that was provided was necessary and appropriate. Nobody really wanted to accommodate that use. And you have, I've got 2 letters in my exhibit list. We don't need to try and pull them up on the screen or anything, but I'll just point you in the direction of them, Mr. Bromley, and that is there's a 2020-1-2. It's so January 2nd of 2020 letter from Phil Boyd, and that was regarding his conversations with us regarding city property. Phil Boyd's an engineer that does a lot of work with the city, and so he addressed that in his letter. And similarly, there's a letter in the file 2019-6-10, June 10th of 2019. The Idaho Parks Department, Randall Butt is the park manager. He also addressed it in a letter that, you know, yep, the property that they managed did not work well for accommodating this use. And so, you know, work right now is currently being done from public boat launches where it's allowed. It's not allowed at all public boat launches, but that creates a potential for unsafe situations when you're loading heavy barges. And it also disrupts the recreational users. It's not a good alternative. It's not a long-term alternative. Go to the next slide. And so continuing this thought, the services that North Idaho Maritime provides, they are essential for the public agencies and for private property owners. The lack of a proper facility adds cost to those public projects that North Idaho Maritime or any other waterfront contractor does. And it really is, you know, a facility like this needs to be considered part of the lake infrastructure on large lakes. These guys are out there doing this every day during the season. If you have a small lake, you can perhaps get away with doing it from a boat launch and closing that boat launch while you're doing these activities because it's intermittent and it doesn't happen regularly or frequently. But that's not the case here. There's a need for this service on a regular basis, and that's just part of having a large lake. Next slide. We go next slide, Chris. There you go. Thank you. And so then the question is, well, why this location? You know, aren't there better locations? Well, again, you look at Wolf Lodge Bay, and there is 16,000 linear feet of waterfront in Wolf Lodge Bay from the eastern edge of Blue Creek Bay on the north down to the northeastern corner of Beauty Bay at the south. That's over 3 miles of waterfront. There are only 2 privately owned parcels in the entirety of that 3 miles of waterfront. One is this subject parcel. The other is the property just to the north. Most of that waterfront is interstate or highway right-of-way. nearly all of it, except for the little bit that's owned by my client and a little bit that's owned by the property owner to the north. The closest residence is 3,200 feet away, over a half a mile. If you look very closely on that photo, there's a red dot at the right-hand edge of the screen, and you can see that red dot. That is the closest residence, over a half mile away. Next slide. Uh-oh, my internet connection's unstable. Okay, there we go. Hopefully you can still hear me. I just had a thing, my internet connection was a little unstable here. So continuing on. Other benefits to this location, it is in an area of other commercial type uses. We consider the Mineral Ridge boat launch that's operated by BLM to be a commercial type use. That is 1,000 feet to our west. To the east, you have, again, at the edge of the screen, there is the campground there. We are zoned commercial. The property to the north is zoned commercial. The property to the east is zoned commercial. So it's kind of a commercial area of Kootenai County. The other advantage to the site, we've got road access. It's at a similar elevation to the lake. That's not common around the lake. We've got, we don't have a big steep slope to there. The site is, it's not gigantic, but it's large enough for what's needed here. And frankly, there are few other potential uses for this site. There's not much you can do with this site under today's regulations. And so it's well suited for this particular use. So we can go to the next slide there, Chris, please. So we've discussed the need for the use and the appropriateness of the site. So let's discuss a little bit about what IDAPA says we weigh those things against. One of them is wildlife and fisheries concerns. The most important aspect here, I think, is the timing of the use. The site really can only be used when the water depth is adequate. And that's generally, that's May through September. We draw down Coeur d'Alene Lake every year. That starts after Labor Day. And so by the end of September into October, the water is getting a little too shallow for us to use this site. And by November, into November, December, the area out off of this property becomes a mud flat. So concern for kokanee spawning, well, kokanee aren't spawning in mud flats, especially mud flats that don't have water in them. And so, their spawning occurs late fall, early winter. And so the low water during that time prevents them from getting into this area, and the muddy bottom is not conducive to their spawning activity. So we're not in there when they're spawning, and they aren't in there because it's not conducive to them spawning in the immediate area of this use. Next slide, please.
So Mr. Wickman, if I could just ask you a question, because there's
Sure.
a pier and a floating dock. So when you're talking about low water, where's the floating dock? Is it just sitting out on the mud flat? What are you doing with it?
It's still floating. We think it's still floating. It depends on what the level of the lake is, of course, but it's probably still floating, but it's in very shallow water, and obviously deeper water at the deeper end of it. But again, it's muddy bottom out there, and it becomes pretty shallow. It might be just a couple of feet of water that dock is floating in. The pier undoubtedly will be high and dry.
Thank you.
You bet. So secondly, the bald eagles are another concern. And really the issues there are the same. They're generally in the area from November through December, sometimes into January a little bit. Again, the site's unusable for us because of low water. A foot of water or 2 feet of water is not enough for us to be getting in and using this site. It's also the slow time of year for this particular business. And so we don't have any activity at the site. we're not concerned for disrupting bald eagles. We're not there. We let the bald eagles have the place in that time of year. And so, you know, also in support of that, we commissioned a report from a wildlife biologist by the name of David Arms. It is in the record. I don't need to flash it on the screen. It is referenced in my exhibits as 2020-7-22. That's July 22nd, and it's called Updated Arms Report, Wildlife Analysis. And so that's his brief report on his take on wildlife impact. He finds that we won't have any, and I'd encourage the Mr. Bromley to take a quick read of that. It won't take long.
Mr. Wickman, this is the hearing coordinator. I have read that, as I said at the beginning, all the written comments that have come in. I have read them, and I have read that report.
Okay,
So,
very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also just point you in the direction of, I'm sure you've read it then as well, the email exchange with Chip Corsi, which was dated May 13th, 2019. That's a little plainer language than the more recent letter. But I think Idaho Fish and Game's position is still abundantly clear. They do not feel like there are likely to be significant wildlife or fisheries impacts with this use at this site, given the timing of the various activities and what occurs when. Go to the next slide. So the next issue is water quality. And on this issue, I think Fish and Game, DEQ, and North Idaho Maritime, we're all on the same page. We all want to ensure that water quality is protected. Dock construction will be completed in the manner and time frame prescribed by IDL to minimize the water quality impacts. If that means it gets done in low water outside of the time when eagles are there, that's not what we had proposed. But you know, we'll work within the time frames that are prescribed to us. And so you know, whatever makes the most sense in protecting water quality. And ongoing activity at the site will be conducted in accordance with the BMPs to protect water quality. Again, this is not an inexperienced operator here. They've been doing this for over 100 years. Obviously, they've gotten better over the course of 100 years. It's certainly, water quality is a much greater concern now, and it's something they believe strongly in and work hard to protect. Lastly, and this is something that has showed up in the comments, is the concern for heavy metal contamination, and that will be disrupting that. We can go to the next slide, please. This is a map. It's a little hard to read at this scale, but you can see I point to the site there in the upper central part of the map there. It shows the site, and again, from a site selection standpoint, if you were basing it on heavy metal concentrations, this is shows concentrations of lead, which is probably a good proxy for all the other heavy metals as well. We're in an area of the lowest heavy metal concentrations anywhere in the lake. And so if you were to try and select a site based on lead concentrations, it would probably draw you to this site as one of the best. And we are right on the, if you really get close, we're right on the fringe where it's, you know, where they aren't even detecting it there. It kind of falls outside of the range. And so, again, we think the heavy metal contamination issue is a non-issue in this regard. Next slide. Aesthetic considerations are another item, and this is a tough one. There's probably no more subjective issue than whether something is attractive or ugly. And so, you know, here are, you know, the museum and the art galleries and things in the area here are full of images of the tugboat imagery and, you know, the working boats on the lake and the history of that. And some people think that that is just the coolest thing. And so to some people, this becomes an attraction. Some people might not like it, might not like the looks of this operation, but some people do. And I don't know how you evaluate aesthetic considerations. I think it's at best, it's a wash. And so, you know, it's an issue that you have to consider. I don't know how you properly weigh that. Next slide. Upland issues, I think you're likely to hear, certainly in the testimony, there are any number of concerns for upland related issues. We have not addressed them as part of this presentation. We don't think they're really germane to this application for the encroachment permit. But we want you to understand that we have thoroughly addressed those concerns with the appropriate agencies that regulate all those things. And if you have questions on any particular item that, you know, maybe an upland issue that we haven't addressed, but you would like more information about, we're happy to address them. We believe we have good answers for all of that. Next slide. And I'm sneaking up on the end here. So public comment, we've got lots of public comment in there. We just, again, I'm sure Mr. Hearing Coordinator is aware of the Idaho Code provision 581306C, which points to Idaho residents and non-resident property owners as being entitled to comment on encroachment applications. You know, we don't put a lot of stock in a change.org petition with signatures from New York or Houston. And so, you know, I don't feel the need to really address that. But I would point you in the direction to two public comments that have been submitted. The Reishes and Sean Taylor both provided comments in the record. They are neighbors to the North Idaho Maritime facility at Hayden Lake. That recently went through IDL's process. We heard much of the same issues for that facility. Mr. Taylor was one of the biggest opponents in that. And, you know, he has come around now to say that that he thinks North Idaho Maritime is a good neighbor up there. And he supports approval of this application. And I think that's germane. Next slide. And so in summary for my part, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Condon to just a couple of marks to finish us out. Again, in summary, this use is indispensable on Coeur d'Alene Lake. It really is part of the infrastructure for Coeur d'Alene Lake. This site is necessary to be able to continue to provide those services that North Idaho Maritime provides. There really are no available alternatives. We've looked for years, and we think this is a good site, and frankly, there aren't any others. We don't believe we have any discernible impacts to fish and wildlife, and we've got information in the file that demonstrates that. Water quality standards will be met for this use, and approval of this site and this use reduces our conflicts with recreational uses so that we aren't preventing recreational users from getting into boat launches and things like that. Next slide. And so that's all I've got for you. If you'll finish the, or end the share screen, Chris, I'll turn it over to Mr. Condon, and he have a few remarks, and then we'll have our part will be completed. So
Mr. Wickman, this is the hearing coordinator, Chris Bromley, and before we go to Mr. Condon, I have one question. I've seen some comments in the record about questions about bathymetry. And yes, at the beginning of your presentation, and I saw it, as an attachment to the application, there was a hand-drawn idea of bathymetry, and I've read some comments about questioning whether that's correct, or questioning whether maybe there were some governmental entities that had better bathymetry. And then from there, there were some questions about, my understanding was you didn't believe there needed to be dredging, but the questions were then coming up, if the bathymetry is wrong, would you then need to dredge? So I thought I would ask you, since I've understood you were the consultant on this, and,
Yes.
and would appreciate your thoughts. Thank you.
Sure. So the agency, there are a couple of versions of the water depth information out there. We didn't, in looking at those, they don't line up with our experience at this site, with what we see out there when the water goes down and what we measured. And so we decided that we needed to do it the old-fashioned way, is let's go out and measure water depth. And that's exactly what North Idaho Maritime did. There is a letter in my list of exhibits. It's referenced 2020-7-22 Carlson comment on NIM bathymetric map. And so that's Mr. Carlson's narrative on how he went about preparing this bathymetric information. They went out, he measured it, and then he spent the winter kind of observing different water levels to make sure that those water levels kind of coincided with what he showed on his bathymetric map. And so we feel high confidence that the water depths that we show in the map that's part of the application, we're high confidence that is the best and most definitive information that's out there. We do not believe that it's necessary to dredge at this site in order to operate. But of course, that means we operate seasonally. If we were interested, or if we had a need to operate year round, you're absolutely correct. At low water, we can't get into this site, but that's not what we're proposing. We are proposing to operate from the site seasonally, and the water depth information that exists in the real world and is reflected on that map, that works for us, and we think it's the most accurate.
Thank you, Mr. Wickman. Appreciate that comment.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Mr. Condon then, and he's got a few brief remarks.
Good evening, Mr. Bromley. My name is John Condon, and this is my wife, Gayla, and we're the owners of North Idaho Maritime.
Mr. Condon, if I could just interrupt you, if you could speak up just a little bit, or maybe come closer. I appreciate seeing both you and your wife in the frame there, but it was hard for me to hear. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is John Condon, and this is my wife, Gayla, and we're the owners of North Idaho Maritime. Just to introduce ourselves and our company, we've been an ongoing operation since 1918. In those 102 years, we have provided hundreds of jobs locally to local citizens. And we put back millions upon millions of dollars back into the local community. We've provided endless services to private and public entities. We've built and maintained numerous public facilities for access by the public to the public waterways. We have, and we endeavor to do so and continue to do so. We're a necessary service. We have always treated the lake like with great respect. It is, in fact, our livelihood. We are the last person that are going to do damage to that lake in any way. it's imperative that we continue to operate in a responsible fashion so that we can continue providing for our families. So I think of all people, you know, commenting to this issue, we have the greatest interest in it because it's very important to us. So I don't think that can be discounted. We also are not a new operation. We've been on the lake for 102 years. And we've operated responsibly for all of those years. The only reason we're before you now is that by no cause of our own, it's necessary that we replace an existing facility we had and operated out of for 90 years at the mill site on the Spokane River. More recently, the city purchased that site and they're currently undergoing transforming that site into a city park. So subsequently we were displaced there, and so we endeavored to find a new location to continue providing the services that we provide. Now we started down this path 10 or more years ago, and we talked with every agency. We uncovered every stone. We spent a lot of time, energy, and resources to then reinvest in this community once again and purchase the property in Wolf Lodge for this facility. Now, we didn't do that without doing a lot of due diligence and talking to the agencies beforehand, of which we had all favorable commentary. So we did start down this path, and we have we've been through the hearings with the county. We've been through the process, and I think it. You know, we plan to continue to do so. But I want everybody to know, whether you know, you're for us or against us, but what I do know is that we do value this lake as much and more than anyone. And as far as the, you know, the aesthetics of our operation, I can tell you that people love tugboats. And it is all in the eye of the beholder, but I can tell you, in all the years of our operation, I have never had somebody come by and tell me that that our operations were unattractive, or that you know, it ruined their vacation because we were operating on the lake. What I have had, though, is that I've had hundreds of people and their families stop by and take a picture with the tugboats. And as Rand mentioned, when you go downtown and go into an art gallery, or you go to the museum and you see the history of this area, the tugboat fleet is predominant in most all of that. So I thank you for allowing us to introduce ourselves, and I'm open to any questions as well that you might have, that you might need clarification on. I can tell you that the bathymetric data is correct. The ones that you find online are basically large-scale bathymetric data that are scans of the entire area. They are not physical measurements. We do it old school, because we're old school. When we want to know how deep the water is, we put a tape to the bottom and measure it. We don't rely upon that information because it's contradictory. So, so thank you once again.
So thank you, Mr. Condon. This is the hearing coordinator, Chris Bromley. By city, which city do you mean? You mentioned the river, which makes me think maybe you were talking about Post Falls, because Post Falls is on Spokane River. but are you talking about city of Coeur d'Alene?
So the city of, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
I was just trying to make sure I understood which city you were talking about.
So the city of Coeur d'Alene is currently building a new park on the Atlas Mill site, which is on the Spokane River within the city of Coeur d'Alene boundaries.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I had for you, Mr. Condon, and I appreciate that you're here tonight. When I look at the application, it's North Idaho Maritime and it's you and your wife. When I look then at the Kootenai County tax records that were submitted in support, or as attachments, I should say, the property, at least on Kootenai County's records, is owned by a living trust.
Correct.
Okay, and
it's the John and Gayla Condon Living Trust.
Correct. So the question that I then have is, I assume that you and your wife who are here today, you are the John and Gayla of the John and Gayla Living Trust. Is that a correct
That is
statement?
correct.
Okay, so you have authority then, as assume you're the trustee of the Living Trust. Do you have the authority to bind the trust, to enter into documents on behalf of the trust?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That is correct. And there is an existing lease between North Idaho Maritime and the trust.
Okay, I'm just wanting to make sure that I understand who everybody is in all of this. That things like this matter, little details like this do matter.
And IDL has a copy of that lease.
I have seen the lease and
trust documents.
Yeah, and just wanting to make sure that I can tie together who's who.
Okay.
So appreciate the answer. Thank you. Any other comments from North Idaho Maritime?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. So are there any governmental agencies on the line other than Department of Lands who wish to provide any comments? Any governmental agencies on the line who wish to provide comments? Okay, I will take that then as the written comments, which I have read, will speak for them. So then I would like to turn to the public for your comments, and first go to Department of Lands rooms. And since I'm not sure who's present, Ms. Funson, I'll start with your room first. And if you have anybody who would like to speak, maybe just let me know first. Do you have anybody who would like to speak?
Mr. Bromley, this is Mike Gamer. We did not need to use that additional room, so we're all just in my room, Wolf Lodge. And it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people that would like to speak.
Okay, so great, Mr. Amer, I appreciate that. So I'll let you be in charge then of your room. I don't have any video of that, so oh, now I do. That's helpful.
What was the big reveal? I was waiting for the big reveal.
Yeah, it is. So hello, everybody. Appreciate that you're here tonight. And
can I ask where you guys are located at?
We are located in Coeur d'Alene, off of Atlas and Industrial Loop. Our biggest cross streets would be Atlas and Kathleen in Coeur d'Alene. And the newspaper advertising this hearing indicated that we requested people to make reservations by July 16th so we could try to figure out what we needed to do for rooms.
okay, so Mike, if you would just please take people in the order in which they signed up, and folks, and this goes for everybody on the phone too, when your time comes to give comment, please state your name and spell it so that we know who you are, and then we'll take your comment, and really appreciate that everybody's here tonight. So thank you.
My name is Chris Crone, K-R-I-S-K-R-O-N. Did you say we need to do our address?
Ms. Crum, it's okay. I think you probably wrote it down. For my purposes right now, if you would just say and spell your name, since we have that written down when you checked in, that's just fine by me.
Okay.
Speak as loud as you can.
Okay. Does he need my name again?
Yes, do it again.
Okay. Chris, K-R-I-S, Crone, K-R-O-N. That's the speaker. And I'm a resident of Coeur d'Alene. And I just want to disclose that my family has owned property on Wolf Point since 1953, which is very close to the Wolf Lodge Bay. Wolf Lodge Bay is one of the last wild, undeveloped areas of CD Lake, yet is easily accessible to the recreational users of the county, which partake in fishing, boating, kayaking, wildlife viewing, and sightseeing. And since hearing Mr. Wickman saying that he seemed to think that it was advantageous that it was so far away from any residential properties or so forth. And the commercial properties like the boat launch is not really commercial, is a public boat launch. That's one of the beauties of that area. It's basically one of the last wild areas. The shoreline is riparian vegetation, even where there are private residences which are modest in size for the most part, truly a trip back in time. I've been coming here since the 50s. This is not about the necessity of a particular business, but rather the best use of this particular piece of land and water access. Given the fragility of the lake at this point, where we are close to a tipping point, it seems rather irresponsible and reckless to gamble with such high stakes for the sake of one business entity that took a gamble when purchasing this property of this encroachment application being approved. Wolf Lodge Creek is the only clean water source that enters the lake now. This much needed endowment to the lake would obviously be adversely affected by this industrial operation or commercial entity, as would the fish and aquatic life that spawns in this area. Mr. Wickman states that that they will assure that the standards of the water quality will be met. That'd be great. Docks are essential to lake life. However, there are over 10 dock builders in the area to choose from, and NIM is already operational in other parts of the lake. We cannot condone the sacrifice of Wolf Lodge Bay for the economic advantage to one business owner. Perhaps a more appropriate use of this property would be if a county or a state entity could purchase this property, close off the road access, and turn it into a public non-motorized watercraft picnic area. And that's all I have to say. I do have more, but.
Thank you, Ms. Crum. I appreciate that.
Good evening, Mr. Bromley. My name is Gordon Theodore Davis, Gordon, Theodore, Davis, D-A-V-I-S. I am a physician, a medical doctor, and recently moved to Coeur d'Alene, but had visited here over the years, so I am fairly familiar with the area and quite love the lake and the environment here. And as a recreational user, I'm frequently on the lake. You probably are unaware of the degree to which the public has been interested in this, as this process began last year through the application for commercial use zoning of this particular land. Ultimately, it was determined it had already been designated as commercial use. But during the public hearing, I believe it was in December, we had 175 or more people, the vast majority opposed to the project, who showed up at the hearing. Many of them were turned away. And then we discovered several weeks later that the zoning had already occurred previously, and therefore the whole process was for naught. But what I want you to know is that there was a great deal of public interest. Now that we have the COVID-19 problem and the necessity to use Zoom or be in small groups, I'm afraid the public interest may not be completely reflected in this particular phase of the project. But please understand, people are very interested in this. I did submit written comments. I don't think you've seen them yet because they were sent by email after 5 o'clock your time. So I won't go into all of the points that I made in this particular statement, but I would appreciate you reading it. The one thing I would ask as part of your fact-finding and decision-making process is, even if you have visited Coeur d'Alene before and Wolf Lodge Bay, please do so again. I would request that you visit it by water, boat, privately, come and see it for yourself, see how many people use the area recreationally, examine the environment. And then the other option I think that would be important is to hike the Mineral Ridge Loop Trail. That's part of our National Recreation Trail system. And this just happens to overlook Coeur d'Alene Lake. And I'd like to read just a small piece from the websites that refer to the views from that trail. For example, it says, a popular 3 to 4 mile loop hike offering breathtaking views of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Mineral Ridge is one of the best locations for incredible views of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Continuing on, the trail soon reaches the ridge and Caribou Cabin. The choice here is to return to the trailhead via the ridge or continue onto Wilson and Lost Man trails, featuring grand views of Wolf Lodge Bay. So please come and see for yourself the grand view of Wolf Lodge Bay. And imagine, if you can, this area having a major intrusive industrial development in it, not only affecting wildlife, undoubtedly water quality, and other aspects of it, but it's going to be an extraordinary eyesore on a scenic parkway and a nationally recognized hiking trail that brings tens of thousands of people into our area. And finally, I was a little, I can't say disturbed, but felt it was a red flag to hear the self-congratulatory statements by the applicant, claiming to provide endless services, value this lake more than anyone. People love tugboats. People are not going to love tugboats. The thousands of people, tens of thousands who have come here and seen it are not going to love to see tugboats and docks and piers and a major industrial operation in Wolf Lodge Bay. So I hope that you'll have an opportunity to personally see it. If I were a lawyer, I would refer to that as a motion for a view. So I greatly appreciate your time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
Mr. Bromley, during that last testimony, I was hearing a little bit of feedback. Was everybody else able to hear that totally fine?
I did. Thank you.
Okay. The Harrisons, any order you'd like to go?
Good evening, Mr. Bromley. My name is Joe Harrison. Also, my legal name is Stanley Harrison. And on behalf of me and my family, thank you for allowing us to speak. I'm the adjacent private property owner to the east. My property line is only 750 yards from the proposed development, and my house sits up on the hill at the end of the lake looking directly down on this site. My family and I are some of the most affected by this change because if it goes through, we'll be forced to have the sights and sounds of a permanent construction zone out of our view 24/7. Think about if this was your home. Every time you look out your kitchen window, your dining room, your living room, your master bedroom, anytime you sit on your deck, anytime you and your kids play in your yard, you'll have to look down and see industrial barges and cranes blocking your view. These aren't just cute little tugboats. John was out there about a year ago. He had a huge barge, 2 huge cranes on the barge, a dredging bucket. He had stuff piled up on the shoreline. It looked like a huge construction zone. Please do not be swayed that these are cute little tugboats that people take pictures of. This is going to be a major construction zone and a complete eyesore in the area. You'll have to listen to dock construction all day long. You'll hear heavy machines like huge cranes loading and unloading supplies. You'll hear heavy equipment constantly driving in and out. It'll be like you're living next to a construction zone hell that never ends and you can never get away from it. Think about it if that was your family and your house. But it's not just me and my family and my house. It's all of our houses, all of our front yards. Literally, it's the first thing you see when you come into this area. It will literally block the view from the official viewpoint pull-off. You can't make this stuff up. The pull-off where it says that that's the viewpoint looks directly on his construction zone he's proposing. I strongly urge you to go out and see for yourself if you haven't been there, because it'll be very blatant to see what the public will see when they come into this area. The campground, my kids are 6th generation North Idahoans. Our family has lived at Wolf Lodge Bay over 50 years, and this change is going to have a huge impact to our quality of life. But it's not just the impact to our family, it's to the entire community, including the campground next door that has 30,000 visitors every year. Nearly every scenic picture on their website is a view that will be blocked by barges and cranes and a huge pier. Their campers are constantly in the bay with canoes, kayaks, sups, and instead of paddling in a beautiful bay, they'll have to paddle around a constant construction zone. So you might be curious, why would Camp Coeur d'Alene not oppose this industrial development? The campground owner is a developer himself that has multiple businesses, and I have a text from him that says he wants to expand to add tree houses and glamping up on the hillside. You don't have to be a big developer to realize that Condon may want to do more with this 108 acres than just industrialize the bay. In fact, North Idaho Maritime was started by John Stone, who developed the huge Riverstone complex in Coeur d'Alene and has been quoted as having developed over $1 billion worth of properties. Many in our community are fearful that this industrial use is just the nose of the camel under the tent that could happen to Wolf Lodge Bay. And that's why the campground owner won't go on the record to oppose this change when it so clearly goes against his business model of recreational use. Speaking of recreational use, it's clear that this industrial use is 100% incompatible with the adjacent uses. You have my residential acreage where I grew up and now raised my family. You have Camp Coeur d'Alene, 100% recreational. Janie Fake's 100 acres was a recreational campground. Now she wants to turn it into a raptor research center. You have 2 major BLM recreation sites on both sides of the bay, including one of the most beautiful and popular hiking trails in the whole area located above the site. This is the area people get out of Coeur d'Alene to come to recreate. When the zoning on this property was done in 1990, it was clearly stated in the order numerous times that it was for recreational use. Never once in the order does it say that it's zoned for anything else, especially industrial use. In fact, in the planning minutes from November 1st, 1989, it says, Mrs. Cobb explained commercial development on this site would be inappropriate unless it is recreational in nature. Mrs. Cobb was the Kootenai County Planning Administrator. I'll include the notes from those from the order so you can see for yourself since you're an attorney, and you can see how it was very, very, very clearly stated that it is only to be used for recreation, not industrial use. This is not the right location for this business. John Condon himself has told me several times he can currently operate on the south end of the lake, but it's further for him and it costs him more. He's also has dock construction in Kruger Bay. So for him to sprawl to Wolf Lodge Bay is especially egregious. He's been operating just fine, but he wants this place because it's cheaper. It's a business decision. This location has terrible access from Highway 97. It's not appropriate for bringing trucks in and out. He's located on the outside of a shady blind corner that has the highest accident rate of any place on the entire highway. The average accident rate on the highway for the last 20 years is 14.2 accidents per mile, where in this area, it has an accident rate of 523.8 accidents per mile. I'll include in my information a graph that shows that. I'm an engineer and I did a study. There's no way for a Department of Transportation standard 65-foot long truck that's legally allowed on the highway to pull out of this driveway without crossing into the other lane when turning right. Log trucks can turn tighter, and I know John uses log trucks, but even on a good day, if he can get his trucks in and out, what if another truck pulls in there? What are they supposed to do? It's going to cause a traffic hazard. So what's the big deal about a traffic hazard since we're only talking about what's below the ordinary high water mark? The big deal is that the ITD says directly in the permit that, quote, permit will be void if traffic exceeds volume stated in the app or safety issues arise. There's a good chance this thing's going to get shut down if there's a traffic hazard at all, and there's a high likelihood there's a hazard. So what will be left if it does? What's going to be left? We'll have a kokanee spawning area, which we have proof of with pictures, a kokanee spawning area, and the mouth of the creek that's been torn up, a huge pier there. Who's going to do all the reclamation? Is it really worth it when common sense says that this is absolutely the wrong location for this business? We're not against North Idaho Maritime. I'm not against John, I find him to be a nice guy, but we're against them buying this land on cheap speculation, expecting the public to pay the cost for the benefit of one company. They can operate other places, they already do, but this is absolutely the wrong location. Please deny this application. It's not right for this area and it'll cause considerable harm. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Good evening. My name is Christy Harrison, K-R-I-S-T-I-E-H-A-R-R-I-S-O-N. And we are the red dot on the one form that was showed earlier. So thank you, Mr. Bromley, for hearing us today. Because of the location of our home, our family has been involved and invested in these proceedings since they began. We have attended them as a family and have seen and heard the inconsistency of the developer's plan. From the beginning, he said he would make a right in, right out of his property due to the business of Highway 97 and its property in the blind corner coming from the west. At the first hearing, before an examiner, a scale, drawing, and model were brought in to show that a right turn in a truck would cross over the center line, as Mr. Harrison said just a minute ago. At the following hearing, Condon presented a model more specific to his business. The examiner asked if the truck would only make the right out and would only be done on an empty logging truck. So no logs on this truck, which would be brought in and out from the lake with these big cranes. Condon replied, yes, they would not have logs on them. The following meeting, he had a video with providing his logging trucks would not cross over the center line of Highway 97. He made a video of this. He was out there doing it. Guess what? There were logs on the logging truck. They did not make a ride out with no logs on the logging truck. Later in the month, he was doing tree removal on his property with pickup trucks and trailers. His employees apparently made a left out when they left the property. We did not see a ride out. This saying one thing and doing another concerns me and should concern the entire community. I have looked through the courtesy notification application for encroachment sent to us by the Idaho Department of Lands. In the DEQ, questions and concerns, there are repeated issues with very vague wording. About, would not be common, could possibly be assembled, usually, most, nor is it accepted, and it goes on and on. I have highlighted it for you. I looked at both the online form compiled on April 6th of 2020 and the one mailed to us at our personal address, stamped May 22nd, 2020. There are several changes made between these two forms with even more vague wording concerning details of the work and mooring areas during full pool and low pool. There is no detailed outline of what will be done in this site, only what might happen. With all the vague wording and the history Condon has of adjusting things as needed, you should not approve this construction business. On the conceptual site plan submitted to the Kootenai County Commissioners hearing, there were a lot of vague words. Typical gravel limits, typical structure setback, 2 proposed parking areas, 2, whenever we've been told there will be at least 8 employees at this site. Approximate location of IDL dock, all at a previous hearing with Kootenai County Zoning and Planning in September of 1989. It was stated, quote, "Speculation is not an appropriate method to show confirmation with comprehensive plan goals or the requirements of Idaho code," unquote. There is a lot of speculation and not any comprehensive plan being presented. North Idaho Maritime already operates out of Cougar Bay and has additional operations at the south end of the lake. He does not need Wolf Lodge Bay, a beautiful and busy part of Lake Coeur d'Alene, where the only lake traffic is recreational. Please deny this application. It's the wrong location, and there are too many uncertainties about the negative effects. Thank you, Mr. Bromley. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Good evening. My name is Alana Harrison, A-L-A-H-N-A. I don't think I have to spell my last name. I'm going to be referencing a few images. They are in this packet of information that I'm going to be handing in, so I won't try to show them to the camera or anything like that. I'd like to direct your attention to file case number PH-2020-PUB-22-002. It's the drawing that was referenced earlier in Mr. Wickman's presentation. In the diagram, Mr. Condon gives you a rough illustration of where the pier and floating dock, as well as a summer dock construction area, are going to be located. Now, if we look at a satellite image of Wolf Lodge Bay, provided by Google is the one that I have, we can see the stream bed flowing into the lake from the spit. This can also be clearly seen from a picture where the creek flows during the winter. And again, I have that image in this packet. From these images, we find that the pier and floating dock are within the mouth of Wolf Lodge Creek. This type of construction and activity interferes with the Idaho Stream Channel Protection Act. According to the Idaho Department of Water Resources website, quote, "In general terms, the Stream Channel Protection Act applies to any type of alteration work, including recreational dredge mining, done inside the ordinary high water marks of a continuously flowing stream. A stream channel alteration is defined as any activity that will obstruct, diminish, destroy, alter, modify, relocate, or change the natural existing shape or direction of water flow of any stream channel. This includes taking material out of the channel or placing material or structures in or across the channel where the potential exists to affect flow in the channel," end quote. There are a few things I want to point out from this specific quote. One, Wolf Lodge Creek is a continuously flowing stream. Therefore, it is protected under the Idaho Stream Channel Protection Act. 2, Mr. Condon is planning to obstruct, modify, and change the natural existing shape of the water flow and is, quote, "placing material or structures in or across the channel where the potential exists to affect flow in the channel," end quote, by building his pier and a bulkhead and doing work in the work area indicated. Thus, he is in violation of the Idaho Stream Channel Protection Act. 3, according to the website, quote, "IDWR, Idaho Department of Water Resources, must approve in advance any work being done within the beds and banks of a continuously flowing stream," end quote. My question is, has Mr. Condon and North Idaho Maritime completed the appropriate paperwork for the Idaho Department of Water Resources? Thus far in the process, we have not seen any permits from the IDWR, and Mr. Condon cannot begin construction until he has the required permits. 4, because the proposed construction violates the Idaho Stream Channel Protection Act, Mr. Condon and North Idaho Maritime should not receive the required permit. Therefore, he cannot operate out of the property in question. Moving on, in previous hearings, Mr. Condon has appealed to past evidence to support his position. I would like to do the same. In 1989, James Belady, the senior water quality specialist, wrote to Kootenai County Technical Services Division concerning Wolf Lodge Creek. He said, quote, Idaho water quality standards specify that Wolf Lodge Creek shall be protected for its beneficial use as a domestic water supply, as an agricultural water supply, for its cold water biota, for salmonoid spawning purposes, and for primary contact recreation. Wolf Lodge Creek is also classified as a special resource water, identified by at least one of the following characteristics. The water is of outstanding high quality, exceeding both the criteria for primary contact recreation and cold water biota, or the water is of unique ecological significance, or the water possesses outstanding recreational or aesthetic qualities, or intensive protection of the quality of the water is of paramount interest of the people of Idaho, or intensive protection of the quality of the water is necessary to maintain an existing but jeopardized beneficial use. These designations and concerns still apply today. The Idaho Department of Environmental Quality released a file, IDAPA 58.01.02, Idaho Water Quality Standards, effective November 21st, 2019, that lists Wolf Lodge Creek as a cold water communities, salmonoid spawning, primary contact recreation, and domestic water supply. As a cold water tributary, recreational hotspot, and drinking water source, any and all proposed changes that affect Wolf Lodge Creek must receive the most severe analysis. That has not happened yet, and I would ask that Mr. Condon's proposal not be accepted until that has happened. Another concern I have pertaining to Wolf Lodge Creek is equipment leakage and oil spills in our lake. My grandfather was a logger in Kellogg and Pinehurst. I understand the history. He owned numerous pieces of equipment, including a crane. I know how much that equipment leaks fluids, and we don't want those parked in the mouth of Wolf Lodge Creek. Back in the day, loggers would dump logs into the bay, and tugboats, yes, would pull logging booms into Coeur d'Alene sawmills. These boats are no summer cruise boats. They're not the cute little cartoon characters you see on kids' TV shows. They are smoke belching, diesel guzzling, oil spilling giants who work hard. And back in the logging days, they left a mess in their wake when the lumber industry moved to roads and semi-trucks. It has taken over a century for Wolf Lodge Bay and Wolf Lodge Creek to recover from the abuse. And now, Mr. Condon is proposing to return the creek and the bay to its logging glory days. We cannot allow this. Not only will potential leaks harm wildlife, but it will damage the drinking water safety of Wolf Lodge Creek, including our family well, which is located near the creek. I understand that Coeur d'Alene used to be a logging town, but since then, that industry that sustains our town has changed from logging and sawmills to recreation and tourism. This is the industry we must build, and Wolf Lodge Bay and Wolf Lodge Creek cannot contribute to that goal if they are full of construction and industrial equipment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. If I could just make a note for everybody, I appreciate again all of the comments. Just slow down just a touch.
Hello.
Thank you.
Absolutely. This is Isaac Harrison, ISAAC, and then Harrison. And if you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
All right. Anyone who travels down Highway 97 can see that this route passes by scenic lakeside bay and natural area known for its walking trails and bald eagle watching opportunities. This is what the bay, the highway, and the east end of the Coeur d'Alene Lake is best known for. This beauty, especially the natural wildlife that flourishes in this area, must be protected. In order to create something as permanent as a pier or bulkhead, we must ensure that endangered species won't be harmed by these developments. Before dock construction, a pier or a bulkhead can be built, it must be shown that it is in compliance with the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Rivers and Harbors Act. The criteria laid out in these laws must be met, and it must be shown that no species would be significantly jeopardized. The endangered bull trout is one such species that could potentially be harmed. The number of bull trout in the east end of the lake is relatively unknown. Yet the Coeur d'Alene Lake Basin as a whole is one of 22 recovery units designed for bull trout in the Columbia River Basin. The bull trout, because it is listed as threatened by the Endangered Species Act, by law must be surveyed before construction can take place. It does not seem that any survey has been done to determine if there are any bull trout in the Wolf Lodge Bay or Wolf Lodge Creek. By law, this survey has to be done through the Army Corps of Engineers for even a project as simple as installing riprap, let alone a huge project like Condon proposes. Not only could this pier have adverse effects on bull trout, it would also affect other types of fish such as kokanee and native West Slope cutthroat trout. It has been stated by Chip Coursey of the Idaho Fish and Game that the peninsula and the submerged private lands are in the shallow portion of the bay and are thus muddy and are not used by kokanee for breeding and spawning. However, while some of the easternmost end of the bay is shallow and muddy, the peninsula is neither. Pictures at low winter water, which I have in this briefing, show not only a plethora of dead spawning kokanee along the rocky shore, but also rocky shoreline that female kokanee can lay their eggs in and all kokanee spawn in. Subsequent spawning lures in other wildlife, such as eagles, which hundreds of thousands of tourists come out to see in this bay. It is in this exact area that the proposed development would take place. As stated by the Idaho Wildlife Federation, development of Wolf Lodge Bay would also have a very negative impact on the water and fisheries at Wolf Lodge Bay. This body of water contains native West Slope cutthroat trout. These cutthroats reside along the rocky banks and up the Wolf Lodge Bay Creek that dumps its deep, cold water directly into the proposed development zone. It also must be noted that by creating this bulkhead, pike population is likely to go up, subsequently reducing the number of native West Slope cutthroat trout in this area. Preserving species such as kokanee and cutthroat trout should be a top priority. This wildlife, along with others, would be threatened if this pier is built and heavy equipment is stored in the sensitive site. It's a fact. Heavy equipment drips fluids that harm wildlife, and this equipment also poses a huge risk if there is a spill or burst due to an accident. It's because of this potential disruption and contamination that all involved must be wary and all steps must be taken to ensure that there would be no impact to the lake if this development took place. People have realized the impact that such a zone change would have, and have thus remained diligent in keeping the east end of the bay pristine. Rezoning, such as the one proposed, have been attempted twice in the past, and have failed both times because of the people's overall desire to protect the natural aesthetics of the area. In 1986 and in 1989, when rezoning was attempted in the Wolf Lodge Bay area, rezoning failed because of the harm that would come about to this part of the lake. In the past, when rezoning has been attempted, the Bureau of Land Management, the Department of Health and Welfare, and the Idaho Fish and Game all stepped forward and said that Wolf Lodge Bay area was an important location for fish, wildlife, and recreation. Kootenai County Commissioners themselves upheld their decision to not allow rezoning, stating, amongst other reasons, that such a zone change would have negative effects on fish, wildlife, wintering for bald eagles, steep hillsides, wetlands, lakeshore, tourist revenue, and overall aesthetics of the east end of the lake. These experts have in the past all held to the belief that the rezoning of Wolf Lodge Bay area would be inappropriate and would ultimately be harmful. It was not until 1990, when the scope of the rezoning area was reduced, that the county reconsidered and allowed a commercial rezone. But even then, it was stated that in the order, numerous times, that would be only for recreational use. There's a huge difference between zoning and use, and an industrial use is not appropriate for this area, nor does it meet the rezoning order, intention, or wording. Since 1990, tourism in Idaho has grown to be an even larger part of Coeur d'Alene culture. Now, more than ever, we must ensure that this scenic drive around Coeur d'Alene Lake remains beautiful, and that the bull trout, kokanee, and native West Slope cutthroat are protected. Now I'm open for any questions you may have.
No, thank you, Mr. Harrison. I appreciate those comments very much, as well as from the other Harrisons as well. Okay, good. I want to hear all of them. Thank you.
There's more of us. I like trout. They taste good. So my name is Isaiah Harrison, I-S-A-I-A-H. The Idaho Business Review reported in 2018 that Idaho has the 10 fastest growing cities by percentage in the United States. Boise took the #7 place, with our hometown of Coeur d'Alene coming in 5th. I myself have seen this continual shift and growth as I have trained on the lake, this very bay, in fact, 6 days a week in what I hope is an Olympic qualification in rowing. My continual use of the lake has allowed me more exposure to this area than most, and as such gives me an acute understanding of what this bay is used for and how it should be preserved. Yes, Idaho is growing, and Coeur d'Alene in particular, but we have to develop in such a way that allows for continued tourism and sustainable future development, both of which would be significantly damaged by Mr. Condon operating his business out of this location. I'm going to do 2 things for you. First, I'm going to be examining how the recreational aspect of Wolf Lodge Bay conflicts with the desired uses. Secondly, we'll look at how the current zoning is completely inappropriate for the proposed usage. According to the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, it says, quote, while a water body may have competing beneficial uses, federal law requires DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, to protect the most sensitive of the beneficial uses. Essentially, what we have here is a competing beneficial use. Luckily, there is an established criterion for determining which use should be valued. There are 3 criterion for determining this. First, physical, chemical, and biological characteristics. Secondly, geographic setting and scenic qualities. And finally, economic and public use. Both Lake Coeur d'Alene and Wolf Lodge Creek are labeled under primary contact recreation, which means that the water quality is high enough for things like swimming, skin diving, and boating. The high water quality in Lake Coeur d'Alene is a prime reason that tourism is such a large industry, an industry on which Mr. Condon completely relies. Forbes reported saying, quote, the city, which is located on the north shore of Lake Coeur d'Alene, owes a large part of its growth to a substantial increase in the tourism industry. Tourism is what largely fuels the Coeur d'Alene economy, and as such, the first aspect of physical, chemical, and biological characteristics have to be upheld for Wolf Lodge Bay because of how used it is. The second criterion is geographic setting and scenic qualities. Wolf Lodge Bay is located along Highway 97, a state-designated scenic highway. It's also widely recognized as one of the most pristine and perfect parts of the lake, as recognized by a number of sources. Lake Coeur d'Alene as a whole has been recognized repeatedly as one of the most scenic and pristine lakes in the entirety of the United States by multiple groups, including National Geographic. The third and most important criterion is economic and public use. The economic and public use of Wolf Lodge Bay cannot be overstated. On any given summer day, it is easy to count dozens, at times even hundreds, of recreational boats within a few miles of the proposed development site. This is largely due to the fact that there are 2 public boat launches and 4 public boat docks in the nearby vicinity, all within 2 miles of the proposed property. Mr. Condon's property borders BLM land on which there is a public boat launch just 700 feet away, and it's used year-round. Between the eagle watchers, fishermen, and summer recreators, this area is under constant scrutiny by visiting eyes. The Coeur d'Alene cruises pass directly in front of the proposed building site. Ironically, Mr. Condon already attempted to begin a development on an adjacent piece of land near Higgins Point, and he was denied by David White, the Parks and Recreational leader from the Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation, because of the recreational nature of the area. To put it simply, based on its current use, the area is completely inappropriate for an industrial style development, and previous hearings wholeheartedly agree with this. The former hearings concerning this property support that this is an improper use of this land. In 1986, the commercial rezoning was denied. It was denied again in 1989. And then in 1990, during a reconsideration, the rezoning was significantly scaled back to convert the spit from residential to recreational commercial. The word recreational is repeated 11 times in the order. The word industrial or any reference to any other use other than recreational, absolutely none. Part 1, page 1 of the order says commercial recreational buyer. Page 3 says it twice, commercial recreational development. On page 4, it specifies 4 times that it is zoned for recreational use. On page 5, it says the half acre is located between the lake and highway and would be a key location for commercial recreational uses. And it just goes on. Mr. Condon cannot and should not develop an industrial business on a recreational zoned piece of property that is surrounded by recreational use. What we have here is a non-conforming use. This is defined by dictionary.law as the existing use, residential, commercial, agricultural, light industrial, etc., of a parcel of real property which is zoned for a more limited or other use in the city or the country's general plan. Usually, such use is permitted only if the property was being used before the adoption of the zoning ordinance, which it violates, end quote. This piece of property has been very clearly zoned commercial recreational, and Mr. Condon wants to use it for an industrial purpose, meaning this change should not be permitted. There are a host of reasons why Mr. Condon should not be allowed to develop this land. He is trying to shove a square peg in a round hole, and that this is a commercial recreational property, and he is using it for an industrial purpose. Not only that, but because of the nature of Wolf Lodge Bay and how it relates to tourism and recreation, Mr. Condon should not be allowed to build here. Based on the status quo, based on our city's needs and priorities, and based on federal law, this development cannot be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Hello, my name is Addison Harrison. It's A-D-I-S-O-N and then Harrison.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Okay. Before I begin the main part of my talk, I want to ask you a question. How much would you give to go to bed every summer night looking out a window, watching the sun go down over a beautiful lake? Well, I have the blessing of seeing this magnificent sight each evening, and I personally know how amazing it is. However, I am not the only person that sees this sight each evening. Thousands of cars drive by my house every day, heading west on I-90, and they too see this very same sight. Now let's move forward a year and add one more equation to this magnificent image. A 170-foot pier and dock jutting out from the shore with barges and cranes lining the sides. These barges are piled with logs and a puffing black smoke that clouds the sky. In front of this pier are dismantled docks sitting there waiting to be repaired the next day. Not only is this new equation a sight for sore eyes, but it also directs tired eyes away from the beautiful sunset and towards this industrial business that these drivers see every day in the city. Out of the 9 scenic highways in North Idaho, Highway 97 has earned the title as one of the most famous summer playgrounds. This title has brought in thousands of tourists, not only traveling around Wolf Lodge Bay onto Highway 97, but also traveling past Wolf Lodge Bay into Coeur d'Alene. In Coeur d'Alene, tourists have the amazing option of going on a boat back to Wolf Lodge Bay where they can see eagles, osprey, red-tailed hawks, herons, and even, if they came this last spring, pelicans. Now, we all know that first impressions count. And if people's first impression traveling past or into Coeur d'Alene is that CDA is a town that allows beauty to be overrun with large, loud boats, then we will slowly lose our attraction and the money that comes from that attraction. This business will be placed at the very gateway of Highway 97, and it should not be the first sight people see when entering this beautiful route. Not only will Condon's business plan harm Coeur d'Alene's economy, but also the 3 campgrounds located around Wolf Lodge Bay. Wolf Lodge Bay Campground, Beauty Bay Campground, and Camp Coeur d'Alene will all be harmed by this business. However, the last campground, Camp Coeur d'Alene, which is a privately owned, beautiful campground, will be hurt the most. This campground is directly to the east of where Condon plans to build, and its main attraction is the beauty. If you go to Camp Coeur d'Alene's website, you will see that several of its pictures are of Wolf Lodge Bay. In fact, the first picture that you see on the website is a picture directly overlooking where Mr. Condon plans to build. And on the top of the picture, it says, "Welcome to this," on Lake Coeur d'Alene's scenic byway. As a camper myself, I know that when I go camping, I want to see the beauty of the world and not an industrial business that I could see every day in any major city. Placing North Idaho Maritime in this location will greatly harm businesses, and with the only goal of growing their own business. Highway 97 is known for its beauty, peace, and quiet, and I do not want it any other way. A year from now, this beauty should not be ruined with any new equations, but should be kept as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
Good afternoon. My name is Elijah Harrison, E-L-I-J-A-H.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Please proceed.
My family lives on the shores of Wolf Lodge Bay. This beautiful bay is flanked by 2 major roads, Highway 97 and I-90. These 2 roads are well traveled on by tourists, locals, and recreational enthusiasts. At the junction of these 2 busy roads is Wolf Lodge Bay, which opens up to the rest of Coeur d'Alene Lake. It is beautiful to look at and even more fun to boat on. There are 2 major boat launches, a marina, and an established recreational area next to the proposed development area. Higgins Point and Mineral Ridge Boat Launch bring countless boats into Wolf Lodge area throughout the spring, summer, and fall months. To the north of Wolf Lodge Bay, Blue Creek Bay, to the north of Wolf Lodge Bay, was, quote, acquired by the BLM from the Wallace family in order to provide public access to the lake and to preserve the area's recreational and historical values. In all 3 of these bays, Wolf Lodge, Beauty, and Blue Creek, numerous boats are on the water daily for recreational use. By approving the building of North Idaho Maritime's bulkhead and pier, the recreational and historical values will be dramatically changed. Every day I look out my window and see gorgeous Coeur d'Alene Lake filled with boats and people having fun enjoying the lake. If you introduce huge barges, dock building supplies, and tugboats, along with loading and unloading cranes into the area, you reduce the recreational use of Wolf Lodge Bay while increasing the dangers of large equipment used in a high recreational area. Please protect the safety and beauty of the shores of Wolf Lodge Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Harrison, A-L-Y-S-S-A, Harrison.
Hello, Ms. Harrison. You may begin. Thank you for coming.
Coeur d'Alene is a beautiful scenic town, which is why certain parts of the lake should not be polluted by loud, noisy, disturbing businesses. Coeur d'Alene has many attractions, including its many hikes. There is one hike in particular that our family enjoys very much, Mineral Ridge. The Northwest Playground says that Mineral Ridge was built in 1962 as the BLM's first developed recreational site in Idaho. In 1982, the trail was designated as a National Recreational Trail. A week ago, when I finished this trail, my brother and I counted 9 different states' license plates at the trailhead of Mineral Ridge. They were all the way from Georgia and Texas to Utah and California. visitors and locals recreate at Mineral Ridge, not to see and hear an industrial business, but to get away from the noise and pollution of industrial businesses. Parts of Mineral Ridge will look right down from the site the developer wants to build. The bulkhead plus 170 feet of pier and dock. It will stick out far enough into Wolf Lodge Bay that the mooring area and the assembly of the modular docks will be visible from several overlooks on the trail. The pier will be visible from Caribou Cabin and Bluebird Overlook. It will also be viewed from Royal and Silver Wave Beach. The noise from below the trail will make this sound like a industrial zone all the time. This past Easter, my family went to watch the sunrise from Wilson Overlook at Bluebird, which is where this picture was taken, and loved the quiet and beauty as it is, just like thousands of hundreds of visitors have. Please preserve the east end of Coeur d'Alene Lake as a recreational destination. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harrison. I appreciate you being here today. And you did a very nice job for, presenting your comments.
Julie? Mr. Hearing Officer, this is our last speaker in this room.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that.
Correct.
Comments?
Okay.
My name is Julie Del Ceso. I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. My interest in this project is as a kayaker for 30 years on Lake Coeur d'Alene.
Ms. Del Ceso, if I could just interrupt you and ask you to please spell your last name for the record, just so we know exactly who you are. Thank you very much.
D-A-L-S-A-S-O. That's like Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate in your hearing tonight. I think it's very germane that comments from the county hearing from the BLM, Mr. Kurt Pavlet, and the Idaho Department of Transportation be included with your comments. I don't know if that's allowed or if they were submitted or referenced, but they are trying to accommodate Mr. Condon at the expense of the public. First off, Mr. Condon was granted approval to build his industrial flotilla for private gain on Cougar Bay by Idaho's Assistant Attorney General within the last year. This fact is integral to realize as the state made exclusions for the Condon Private Family Trust in light that they did not own property or have littoral rights on Cougar Bay. They may choose to exercise those rights a little later after they get what they want on Wolf Lodge Bay. Clearly, the public can't support either. This fact about Cougar Bay wasn't read in the news, especially the local newspaper, though known to most developers who also await their special privileges too. It's already been mentioned the nature of these industrial activities can be run from inland operations, multiple yards and properties already owned by Mr. Condon. It's also understood that North Idaho Maritime was only purchased by the Condons within 10 or 12 years ago. They don't have grandfathering rights on these bays from the steamboat days. That's totally out of context. It's an atrocity to even consider another loading dock and bulkhead that is negotiating our ordinary high water mark. It's vague, and it will allow 24/7 shipping docks on Wolf Lodge Bay, maybe over to their Cougar Bay site, or maybe down south. Those are cumulative impacts with dripping hydraulics across our lakes and waterways for years to come. The nature of these industrial activities can be run from their lake property. They had alternative sites on Hayden Lake where I understand there was a denial, but perhaps Mr. Wickman has some new changes and there's another site approved up there. I understood it was denied. His burning need to expand his business at 2 locations on our lake is not in the best interest of the state, representing the public needs, not just economic needs for the Condon Trust. They can lose the lease with North Idaho Maritime anytime. They're the landlords. They can fire them, hire them, or not. Our Idaho Land Board knows Lake Coeur d'Alene is the only lake in the great state of Idaho that allows for dock storage, while Payette Lake and others wouldn't have it. Please laugh when you hear how difficult it is for construction companies to have access to our waterways for our collective benefits and waterway protection. We really don't need their services. They like to have you believe. How do other lakes manage without growing industrial yards occupying their lake surfaces? I hope the decision to use alternatives existing in current construction spaces to their capacity that are inland can be emphasized over allowing long-term impacts 24/7 from construction barges moving across our lake and occupying 2 bays, not 1. If Hayden Lake wouldn't allow it, neither should Lake Coeur d'Alene. If Kootenai County thinks the standards for water quality when the Dolphin restaurant was hanging out in Wolf Lodge Bay in the 70s, then we're not looking at all the science and progress we've made for the last 20 years. A lot of research, a lot of testing. Remember, Lake Coeur d'Alene is full of heavy metals. It's within the Coeur d'Alene watershed, within the contamination parameters of the Superfund site. Much time and expense has helped to decrease the loading impacts to human health and the ecosystem from lead and arsenic in Lake Coeur d'Alene. We need to value the upstream efforts, restoration, and monies invested over 20 years to improve water quality within the Coeur d'Alene watershed and ecosystem. Do not take Mr. Wickman's word for having sound concerns about water quality. How will the water be tested? Over what duration of time? I do believe that structures related to construction needs and drilling pylons may need to be attached to our lake bottom. The drilling and industrial activity will cause disruption to layers of heavy metals. The flow of the river from Wolf Lodge Creek will help carry the disrupted sediment. These are non-point sources of pollution to our lake that will go unmeasured. I do not believe the Department of the Idaho Department of Lands navigable waterways will have the resources with Governor Brad Little's budget cuts to enforce any conditions that may be negotiated with the attorneys. Conditions with permits are very weak in the state of Idaho. I understand that there have been violations on file with the Idaho Department of Land mounted by Condon's last 10 years of work on our lake. Please please take poisoning our lake water seriously. Even if, like our amazing aquifer, you cannot really see these non-point releases from the barge industry and their long-term cumulative impacts throughout the lake. Do not let state jurisdictions give fuel to the nature of fragmented agency decisions. Listen to the Department of Transportation and the BLM. Support the DEQ's work upstream. Also, the industrial storage containers that have been requested to have on the Mudspit site along Highway 97 will actually block our scenic view of our scenic Idaho highway. And also, what will be in those storage containers in those floodways? They will contain hazardous materials that could leak in our flood zone. I do believe there is a conflict of interest with North Idaho Maritime contracting with the state to remove debris and patrol our waterways. It's problematic and misrepresented on both sides. The good old steamboat days when logs were floated on waterways toward the tugboat shorelines of the mill has passed. The state does not owe Mr. Condon permanent moorage at the old Atlas mill site on the Spokane River. And nor do we owe him moorage space on Cougar Bay. Nor does he have rights for submerged lands without submerged land leases. I'm not an attorney. Laws have changed since I did my homework on some of these issues. Clearly, it did not include the historical days, did not include Mr. Condon or his grandfather. There are no grandfathering rights. Just say no to this nonsense about vested rights or the grand history of his 10 years with NIM. I know it's more like 12 years, and I do mean to be respectful there. The mudspit at Wolf Lodge Bay, owned and occupied by Condon in the last year or so, has had extra gravel poured on it to alter the elevation of the bulkhead site. It wasn't merely for the Avista and utilities needed, but partly so. Our state must not let these attorneys negotiate our ordinary high water line as a mere loophole. The shoreline water line was debated out of the discussion where the Cougar Bay variances were gifted to the applicant recently. The applicant works the county against the state as indicated by the playbook. Also, if new uses are dependent on these flood levels, stating that this little mud spit is only going to be for seasonal use, then further vagueness allows the operation to expand without accountability or limitations. These expanded rights are given on the backs of our ecosystem, wildlife, and the pre-existing current day uses you've already heard about. And it's wrong, it's unequitable. Clearly, public liabilities have been noted by the BLM. The deaths and the injuries to personal property and life have been had been noted in the record by the Department of Transportation at this serious curve on 97. Both agencies and the people of the state must not make accommodations on both Wolf Lodge and Cougar Bay for the Condon Family Trust. There was no input from the public at the Cougar Bay decision for their new encroachment. There's been no environmental assessment for the sensitive ecosystem concerns at Wolf Lodge Bay. I believe those are needed, and I do not believe we should be holding two poor choices of allowing encroachments on our lake. Neither of them seem reasonable, especially given all the other options and the sources on the south side of the lake. This business is not being threatened, nor is it essential to be located on our lake. It doesn't happen on other lakes across the state. I do not believe the mud spit bulkhead as the loading station will be used on a limited basis. I believe there will be upslope development, and it will be constant activity and industrial disruption in a little time, meaning what, a year, 2, 5? Especially for loading the lake with unnatural construction materials that can be hazardous and spilled along our scenic Highway 97. But this is only phase 1. Why must the traffic wait for them to allow their special unnecessary obstruction of highway traffic when it's convenient for one business operator? They could lose their lease tomorrow. At the county hearing, the applicant explained that Highway 97 is narrow at other locations too. It was very sad to hear how the applicant's rep minimized the value of safety, lost lives at this very highway location. We don't need to make it worse, especially given the record. In closing, history is a teacher. There was a barge accident at Blackwell Island by Mr. Condon himself about 8 to 9 years ago. It was reported in the Spokesman Review News. It noted that Mr. Condon was learning to drive a barge. He rammed the barge upon the shoreline, no matter how minimal Mr. Condon made it sound. It tore up the shore. It dumped gravel along riparian buffers. This Spokesman Review article is cited in the county hearing records in 2019. Mr. Condon noted in the article that the environmental concerns were of no significance to his business. Read the article to interpret the careless attitudes of the operator or how it may sound to you. We have assaults on our lake coming from many sources without ignoring reported observable events by the applicant. Has it been just 10 years of bad luck since he's owned NIM? Is it the nature of the applicant's need for business to thrive dependent on our lake and all other qualities? And yes, aesthetics can be defined. There are many other public trust attributes to consider besides the economics for Mr. Condon's family trust. Please deny the application at this time, and I really am grateful for you holding this hearing. I am in closing an attachment about the facts of the heavy metals at this location. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Del Sasso. Thank you again to the Harrison family for all coming out. I understand, Mike, that that's everybody who's present at Lands. Is that correct? Who wishes to give comment?
Correct, sir. This room is done speaking until it's my turn. Okay.
So, as we said at the beginning, now we'll turn it over to Andrew Smith, who has the list of folks on Zoom. Hopefully you've sent him a chat with your name and your interest in speaking. Andrew will go through that list. He'll call your name, and then we'll take your comment, and then go to the next person, and so on and so on. So, Andrew, could you please call out the first person's name?
Sure. The first person to message me was Jim Brady.
Okay, Mr. Brady. And it looks like you're on mute from my end, Mr. Brady. There you go.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Hearing Coordinator Bromley. As you have read my submitted comments, you know I've spent a lot of time at the department, many, many years, but retired a year and a half ago. There's been a few things said tonight that I don't think are quite accurate. And I don't know if, for instance, if you want me to clarify those things or if you would prefer to have Mr. Amer clarify them, like the jurisdiction of this particular property, whether it's IDL or IDWR.
So, Mr. Brady, it's your opportunity to comment. So,
okay,
you know, please feel free to say what you would like to say, just as I would say to anybody else.
Okay. Lake Coeur d'Alene is recognized by the courts as having a ordinary high water mark, not an artificial high water mark, and therefore, which is 2128 Washington Water Power Datum, and an ordinary low water mark of 2121 Washington Water Power Datum. The Wolf Lodge Creek is therefore, when it's exposed in the mudflats, is not a continuously flowing stream when the lake is up at 2128. Therefore, at this particular location, therefore, it is waterward of the ordinary high water mark and is under the jurisdiction of the Idaho Department of Lands. The other thing I think that Mr. Amer is going to need to clarify is that I don't believe that North Idaho Maritime has permits to conduct business in Cougar Bay. So he should clarify that. When I left in October of 2018, he did not have permits at that time, and I had been working with North Idaho Maritime since 2009, 2010 to try to remedy that situation. And I believe that this location is one of the last locations where this type of activity can take place. The rest of the shoreline, the highest and best use is residential or residential commercial. As you will see in my comments. And I don't want to take any more time than that. I just thought it was important to clarify those two things at this point, besides the comments that I submitted.
So yeah, thank you, Mr. Brady. I appreciate that. I did read your comments, and I do appreciate the comments you've given just now. So thank you.
Okay. No
okay,
questions?
Andrew, who do we have next?
Let me unmute myself. Next is Jennifer Abisher.
Okay, hi Jennifer. I can see your video camera now. If you could just please spell your last name for the record and then present your comments. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Abisher. My last name is spelled A-E-B as in boy, I-S-C-H-E-R.
Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to come and I've heard a lot of, you've received a lot of the different specific data. I grew up in the same home on the end of Wolf Lodge Bay and grew up there, and I left in 1986 to go to college, but I still bring my family up there that's our family home there on the end of the lake. And now I'm bringing my grandkids there. And Wolf Lodge Bay is one of the last pristine pieces of Lake Coeur d'Alene. There's been so much commercialization just from the natural, people moving there. Every time we go up, we always are just amazed at how much the changes are happening, how much development we see. But yet we go out to to our family home where my brother and his family still live. And it's that preservation of that pristine place that you can go to. And the wildlife is just, you know, not only the bald eagles, and, you know, Mr. Wickman talked about, you know, it's only affected, they're in operation from May to September. That is like the key time to see all that wildlife. The ospreys are there year round. The bald eagles, of course, were mentioned, but there's just, you know, numerous kinds of wildlife. It could be a wildlife sanctuary, it really is. And he also mentioned that there's already 2 other commercial zoned properties, but both of those properties are not industrial properties that obstruct views, that put, you know, all the other comments I've been listening to tonight, that will totally change that bay. You have the campground, which I grew up, you know, living next to that campground, and just all the enjoyment and just watching the families through the years. And that continues to happen from all over the world. I mean, you know, you have people coming literally from all over the world to enjoy that pristine bay, and camping and the canoeing, you know, just all the water sports. It's just, I'm highly opposed to this coming in and just transforming this bay into, you know, especially an industrial zone, when so much tourism is coming to Coeur d'Alene. And you see, every time we're home, we see tons of people out, you know, just stopping along the road to take pictures. We have photographers, you know, people watching the wildlife, people fishing. We've enjoyed canoeing through the years. And, you know, it's just endless of all the activity, and just the quiet waters too. Mr. Wickman also mentioned, you know, a long time ago, the Green Dolphin. I grew up remembering that restaurant, and it was a cute little restaurant at the end, had nothing to do with any industrial. It was just a neat place to go eat. And so there's no comparison, comparing that to, you know, a commercial place that was there, comparing to what he is wanting to do there, and putting in the, you know, all the barges and the pier. And so I'm highly opposed to that, and I hope all these considerations are taken in before allowing this to happen. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Avishar.
Next is Ted Cowper.
Okay, Ted, are you on the line?
I'm here, thanks.
Okay, Ted, if you could please spell your last name for the record.
Yes, it's C-O-W-P-E-R.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cowper.
Yeah, first of all, I want to second the comments made of others that have preceded me. My comments are relative to the quality of the decision-making. In my experience, to the extent that limitations, restrictions for any permit are unenforceable, they don't exist. So I would like the enforceability to be considered in the decision-making here. And I will use an example of what they describe as upland use. Other speakers have spoken to the dangerous vehicular access to the site on a blind curve. I believe ITD has put limitations saying no left-hand turn. I have seen people make left-hand turns out of there. And what I'm referring to is the things that human nature is going to do. To the extent that the applicant has agreed not to make left-hand turns, but does not provide a physical barrier to make it impossible to make a left-hand turn, there's a tacit agreement that left-hand turns will be made. And my suggestion is that limitation is unenforceable. And I bring that up as an example because that is only an example of what human nature is going to use the whole site for. If make a business decision, I know I'm not supposed to do something according to restrictions and limitations. I may calculate in there what's the risk of getting caught, and if I do get caught, what's the downside? I do not appreciate the values of those who look for forgiveness as opposed to permission. And I suspect that anytime someone does not volunteer constructive restrictions that make it impossible for them to perform, they put themselves in the position of asking for forgiveness. And when those elements go into the decision-making process, that process is better. My concern is that they do not. I am interested in this process being more of substance than appearance. And so my request is to receive assurances from all the government bodies involved that they will see to it that a good quality decision is made here. And that if something is practically unenforceable, that it not be allowed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cowper.
The last person to message me was Sunshine Smith.
Okay.
Give me just a moment here. There we are.
Sure, I see you there. Hi, Ms. Smith.
Hi. My name is Sunshine Smith, SUNSHINE-SMITH. I was born and raised in Coeur d'Alene. My family is all over the North Idaho area. I have a lot of family at Blue Creek. I spent a lot of time on Wolf Lodge Bay, Beauty Bay, the restaurant, the resort, you name it. I would ask that Mr. Condon's request be granted. Let me just put a scenario out there for everybody that's been a part of this hearing. I have listened to the whole comments that everyone has made. And granted, I understand their position. I understand where they're coming from. But the number one benefit that we get from Mr. Condon being able to develop his dock is emergency response. We just had a plane crash on that end of the lake. Imagine if any one of your family members were in that plane. Wouldn't you want a quick response to maybe try and save their life? Because I'm sure the 5 people that were in that plane would love to have their life saved if possible. And having a dock there to provide emergency response would have given quicker access to that crash and possibly saved a life or 2. We get kayaks that tip over and people that drown because they're not properly life jacketed. We get boat accidents, people that break down in their boat. Having something on that end of the lake that allows our community a safer community, there's nothing there. Response times are coming out of Coeur d'Alene, coming out of Cougar Bay, coming out of wherever they're located because they're having to use public access docks. And having to close those down for those who want to use the public docks or the public boat launches for recreational use. Now you have to wait because emergency crews have to shut it down. Whereas if there was this dock already there where emergency response teams were equipped to respond, you don't have to wait to get onto the lake to enjoy your day. And in the terms of bald eagles and spawning grounds, I agree with the Fish and Game and the Idaho Department of Lands and John Condon's representative. It's not going to affect the bald eagles or the spawning grounds because they're not there during the times. The bald eagles are there in the wintertime. And North Idaho Maritime won't be using that facility in the wintertime. They won't have cranes or docks or barges hooked up to the dock because what's going to happen? They're going to sit in the mud flat, and then they have more damage to their equipment. So they're going to haul everything away from the dock during the non-season time, essentially. But it really comes down to the benefit that the community will get by being able to have a dock or a response team at that end of the lake. Because if that was my family, and I have 2 little ones, and we were out there playing or kayaking, which I do avidly, and something happened, I would want somebody to be able to get to us as fast as they possibly could. And knowing that the response time is going to be coming from Coeur d'Alene, which is, as they pointed out, 6 miles away, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to save both my kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith.
Mr. Brawley, nobody else has messaged me to speak.
Okay. So is there anybody else who hasn't messaged Andrew who would like to provide comment? And happy to take those comments. Just speak up and let me know who you are, and we'll take them in. Okay, anybody else interested?
How can you hear me? Can I speak in?
Yeah, absolutely. What's your name?
My name is Janet Torline.
Okay, Janet, how do you spell your last name?
Torline.
Okay, Ms. Torline, go ahead.
Yes, I think the big issue, listening to all the comments, I think the ultimate deliverance of a decision is based on the public trust doctrine. And that doctrine in the state of Idaho and across the United States, public comment and public benefits against a specific beneficiary. And I think it's really evident in this situation that the public trust doctrine would uphold the beneficiary uses for the public as opposed to this North Idaho Marine personal uses. And I submitted comments, and I appreciate you reviewing all the comments that have been submitted, but ultimately and legally, you as public trust officiaries need to uphold this doctrine. And I think the evidence is really clear that the beneficiary uses for this place are for the public, not just the local public, not just the issues that North Idaho Marine services they provide, which I agree are great services. But by the way, it was not only North Idaho Marine that responded to the plane crash at Powderhorn Bay. It was Eastside Fire District. They were out there with the fire boats. Volunteer, all volunteer. North Idaho Marine has contract relationships, many of which are quid pro quo. You do this, we'll give you a reduced rate on your dock storage or whatever uses you are having public waters. So I think IDL needs to really look at the public trust doctrine and weigh the values of what all citizens, not just for Idaho, because these are public waters across the United States that we have ownership to and we have rights to and we have investment in, not just for ourselves locally, but for all of us. and for all the waters and the habitat and the fisheries. So I would advocate that you consider and look at the legalities of all the public trust doctrine issues. And I do not feel that North Idaho Marine serves that value for our not only local waters, for our national navigational public trust waters. So thank you so much for your time. This is an important issue, particularly for a lake whose health is failing. And everything we can do to preserve the quality of this lake, which is already failing, has a larger economic and social value than someone's individual profit.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's all I have to say.
Oh, sorry, Ms.
Okay,
Caroline. Didn't mean to
thank you
speak
very
over.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
you.
Okay, and is there anybody else who hasn't commented yet who would like to provide comment?
I would make a comment if you can hear me now.
Sure, I can. It looks like your name on the screen is Chris Tolley.
Yes, I have been a resident and of the area for 40 plus years now. I actually have been a guest in the Green Dolphin restaurant and had dinner there back many years ago with my parents. And I really appreciate everyone's input and extra concern over this issue and looking into it. I really myself am understanding that the business of the lake and the docks and the service that is going on, it absolutely requires a company like North Idaho Maritime to be able to function. And it's important and imperative that they are able to have a place to operate. And there is no, I don't think, after watching my whole life, watching the operations of the lake and the business of the lake, that I don't see how anything that they're going to be doing is going to cause any demise or damage to the lake. And but I do appreciate all the concern of everyone involved here and everyone's interest. But it really seems like if you're around the lake or you understand what's going on with the lake and all the people that are wanting to be on the water, we do need people to help service and work on docks and such. And we need to have someone to be able to help get these things done. And North Idaho Maritime, I think, is going to be a fine steward down there in Wolf Lodge Bay and shouldn't cause anyone any problem. Thank you very much for the time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Tolley. Anyone else who would like to provide comment? Okay, hearing none, that then would bring us to the end of the public comment period. I would then ask Mr. Amer or some other representative with the Department of Lands, as I mentioned at the beginning, to provide the comments from the department.
Hello, Mr. Hearing Officer. My name is Mike Amer, spelled A-H-M-E-R, and I am the Resource Supervisor for the Public Trust Program in Northern Idaho. And before I read my prepared statement, which will be available to the public online, I kind of wanted to cover a couple of things, some notes that I took from earlier testimony. Mr. Brady had mentioned the Cougar Bay situation, as did Miss Del Ceso. And IDL does not have any permits issued to North Idaho Maritime for any activity in Cougar Bay. We have issued a notice of non-compliance for work they're doing in Cougar Bay, and they have submitted an application, and we're working through processing that application, and there will be a public hearing for that application. We are going to move directly to a public hearing for that one as opposed to waiting for any public comment. So I just wanted to clear that up. Mr. Brady also did mention the IDWR versus IDL thing, issue, I should say, and he is correct. IDL has jurisdiction up to 2128, and in that location, that would be us all the way to the highway. Another thing that I've heard several times today has to do with whether dredging would be allowed, and there's also been a lot of mention of bulkheads. I just wanted to clear up that there is no mention of dredging or installing a bulkhead in this current application. So there cannot be any of that activity allowed. If this permit were to be approved, they're not allowed to do any dredging. Even if the numbers were wrong with the bathymetry maps, they would need to make application to do any type of dredging activity. And they also would need to make application to install a bulkhead. There may be some misconceptions of whether the land is considered a bulkhead, but IDL considers a bulkhead to be a structure that would be in the water. And again, nothing of that nature has been applied. Earlier in the hearing as well, there was mention that only members of Idaho, residents of Idaho, would be able to submit comments for a hearing. However, according to IDAPA 20.03.04.030.06, it states that any person may appear at the public hearing and present oral testimony. Written comments will also be received by the department. So I just wanted to clear up a couple of those issues. And now I will get into my prepared statement. And as I mentioned before, this will be available online so people can see it, and it will be submitted to you as well, Mr. Hearing Officer. It is long, so please bear with me. I will try to scan over some of the IDAPA rules and just mention the citations.
Mike, this is Mr. Amer. This is Chris Gozo. Real quick before you get started, did you want me to share that document as well?
You know, good question. We talked about it earlier, but let's not do that.
Okay,
so
not a problem.
Leave it blank.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for asking, because I told you to do that earlier, so thank you, Chris. All right, good evening. My name is Mike Amer, and I am the supervisor of the Public Trust Program at Idaho Department of Lands. My purpose in being here today is to provide you with information regarding IDL's assessment of application for encroachment permit number ERL-95-S-1378B, filed by North Idaho Maritime. As shown on the application in the record, the applicant is seeking an encroachment permit to install a 10-foot wide by 70-foot long commercial pier with 50 feet of that length below the ordinary high water mark, or OHWM, and a 10-foot wide by 100-foot long floating dock, as well as a work area. The existing permit. The original encroachment permit for this property, ERL-95-S-1378, was issued on February 1st, 1978 to Lobo Lodge, Inc. for moorage and piling as part of the old Green Dolphin floating restaurant that's been mentioned tonight. Current application. As mentioned before, the applicant is seeking to permit a 10 by 70 pier with 50 feet below the ordinary water mark and a 10 by 100 floating commercial dock and an approximately 80 by 120 foot summer work area. Now I'd like to get into the timeline for this application and the processing. On March 18th, 2020, North Idaho Maritime submits the original encroachment permit application. On March 30th and April 3rd, 2020, IDL emails North Idaho Maritime informing them application's incomplete and following up on receiving that additional information. On April 6, 2020, North Idaho Maritime submits the requested information for application. On April 7th, IDL submits application for agency review and comment. On April 10th and April 17th of 2020, the Coeur d'Alene Press runs advertisements regarding the North Idaho Maritime application. On April 16th, 2020, IDL coordinated a Zoom meeting with North Idaho Maritime and IDEQ to address questions IDEQ has regarding the application. The purpose of this meeting was because the agency notification we send out to the agencies instructs them to direct questions to the applicant. However, in the 6+ years I've been doing this job, both the agencies and the public and the neighbors always contact us with the questions, and we kind of turn into a middleman. So instead of having that middleman game play along, we decided to facilitate a meeting between the agencies, DEQ and us, and the applicant to get those concerns addressed. On April 22nd of 2020, IDFG, Fish and Game, submitted their comment letter. On April 23rd, 2020, North Idaho Maritime submits information responding to IDEQ's questions and concerns that were raised at that meeting. On May 1st, 2020, IDEQ emails IDL stating that all of IDEQ's concerns have been addressed by North Idaho Maritime's response. On May 4th, 2020, Kootenai Environmental Alliance emails IDL asking for additional information on the application. On May 8th, 2020, Bureau of Land Management submits their comment letter. On May 11th of 2020, IDL emails North Idaho Maritime asking for additional information per KEA's request. On May 21st, 2020, North Idaho Maritime submits additional information and IDL deems application complete on this date. On June 8th, 2020, a notice of appointment of hearing coordinator and public hearing is distributed. And then June 20th and June 27th of 2020, the Coeur d'Alene Press runs advertisements regarding the application and specific details regarding the public hearing we're having tonight. I also would like to mention that earlier this week, I spoke with IDFG, their director Chip, and I also spoke with IDEQ and their director Chantilly about this application and their comment letters. One of the things that I put down on my notes for that was that in relation to some of the comments I heard today, was that the director of Fish and Game made a comment that they currently do fish studies in this area every single year, and they will continue to do those, so they will be able to determine if there's any impacts to the fisheries in that area. And very similarly, DEQ mentioned that they have a monitoring station nearby and that they will be able to collect baseline data, and they will continue to monitor that area for water quality. The next section of my statement is what I mentioned I might kind of skip over a little bit. These are the applicable provisions of the Lake Protection Act and the rules that we follow when we're processing an application. So the one that's mentioned before is 58-1301, which is also the same, more or less the same as IDAPA 20.03.04.012. There's also 58-1302, 58-1306. And the applicable IDAPA rules pertaining to the application, the first section would be the definitions, 20.03.04.010, the definitions for commercial navigational encroachment, which is number 10, number 33, which is the definition of a riparian or littoral owner, and number 4, which is the riparian or littoral right lines definition. Under section IDAPA 20.03.04.015 encroachment standards, there is 13.E, which is presumed adverse effect. And then lastly, under IDAPA 20.03.04.055.01, it talks about how a lease or easement would be required for this such application. The next section is IDL's analysis of the application's compliance with the LPA, Lake Protection Act, and associated IDAPA rules. IDL recognizes that North Idaho Maritime is a lessee of a littoral owner whose lot has over 600 lineal feet of waterfront in the immediate area. As a littoral owner, North Idaho Maritime has littoral rights and is eligible to make application for an encroachment permit. IDL has determined that North Idaho Maritime is seeking an encroachment permit for a pier and floating dock along with a summer work area. There are no IDAPA requirements or restrictions on sizes for commercial navigational encroachments like there are for single family and community docks. The proposed pier and dock extend 150 feet from the ordinary high water mark of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Wolf Lodge Bay is approximately 1,400 feet wide at the location where the pier dock is proposed, and approximately 1,050 feet wide at the narrowest point where a finger of land protrudes southward into the lake. There are no other docks in the area that would set or determine a line of navigability in this location. NIM, North Idaho Maritime, owns all of the southern shoreline back to the east, and the bay continues to get more shallow as you move back deeper into the bay towards the east. Therefore, IDL does not feel the proposed pier dock would constitute a hazard to navigation due to the width of the bay. The proposed pier dock appears to be located more than 300 feet from the western property boundary and 180 feet from the eastern property boundary, well beyond the required 25-foot setback of commercial facilities. The conclusion. IDL concludes that the proposed application appears to meet the standards and specific IDAPA requirements pertaining to commercial navigational encroachments. Many of the IDL received touched upon fish and wildlife habitat, mainly salmon and eagles, water quality, aesthetics, and traffic concerns. Idaho Code 58-1301 requires that all encroachments upon, in, or above the beds or waters of navigable lakes of the state be regulated in order that the protection of property, navigation, fish and wildlife habitat, aquatic life, recreation, aesthetic beauty, and water quality be given due consideration and weighed against the navigational or economic necessity or justification for or benefit to be derived from the proposed encroachment. IDL first notes that it has no regulatory authority above the ordinary high water mark or artificial high water mark. Therefore, IDL does not have jurisdiction over traffic issues on roads or highways. In addition, IDL is not the expert when it comes to fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, or traffic. As part of the processing of the application, IDL sent copies of the application to IDEQ, IDFG, IDWR, ITD, Lakes Highway District, Kootenai County Community Development, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Kootenai County Sheriff's Department, Panhandle Health, as well as Kootenai Environmental Alliance. IDL relies on our sister agencies with expertise in their fields to provide comments and concerns regarding a proposed project. In the case of the North Idaho Maritime application at Wolf Lodge Bay, IDFG stated that the proposed pier dock, quote, will have little impact on angling opportunity due to the location being in a shallow backwater area of the lake, end quote. They further recommended that if the permit is approved, all work should take place in the low water season, preferably after January, to limit impacts to fish spawning sites, bald eagles, and associated tourism. IDFG also recommended keeping the footprint of the dock facility to the smallest size possible. The proposed dock would extend 150 feet from the ordinary high water mark to a depth of 9 feet in the summer and 1.5 feet in the winter, with the overall width of the bay being approximately over 1,400 feet across in that location. While IDL acknowledges that the proposed pier dock is longer than a typical single-family dock, the proposed pier dock does not appear to be excessive based on water depth and the fact that it is a commercial facility. IDEQ had some questions regarding the application, and IDL helped facilitate a meeting between North Idaho Maritime and IDEQ to address those questions and concerns. North Idaho Maritime provided a written response to IDL and IDEQ regarding IDEQ's questions. IDEQ responded by stating that North Idaho Maritime had, quote, addressed all of the issues, so I won't be submitting comments on the updated application, end quote. IDEQ also mentioned that they will collect background lead data in the immediate vicinity and will perform future monitoring in the same location to determine whether activities related to the permit resulted in an exceedance of water quality standards. If an exceedance is detected, IDEQ will take appropriate action and would work with North Idaho Maritime to bring the activities into compliance with water quality standards. That came from an email from IDEQ dated July 21st of this year. Again, IDL does not have any jurisdiction on the uplands, especially as it relates to traffic, right turns only, and turning around at the BLM boat launch. Similarly to IDL relying on IDFG to provide comments in relation to fish and wildlife species, IDL has to rely on ITD for their expertise in regulating traffic. If the project is approved, IDL recommends the following specific terms and conditions be applied to the permit. Initial dock building activities must take place no earlier than February 1st to minimize the impact of fish spawning sites as well as the bald eagles who use the area in the winter. Additionally, BMPs will be employed during construction until disturbed areas are fully stabilized. No winter dock storage can occur in this area. That was number 2, I apologize. Number 3, no dredging is allowed as part of this application and permit. Number 4, no dock construction or work activities take place in the low water season to limit impact on fish spawning sites and bald eagles, as well as ensuring the bottom of the lake bed is not being scoured by prop wake, given that the depth is only 1 to 1.5 feet deep at the end of the proposed pier dock, according to the bathymetric map. Number 5, the summer dock work area is cleaned up and free of debris by October 1st of each year before the water level recedes. Number 6, remove and properly dispose of all existing piling at the site. And finally, number 7, applicant shall consult the county weed superintendent, ISDA, or regional aquatic natural resource management designee on the distribution of aquatic invasive species and noxious weeds and travel lanes. Areas with known noxious weed infestations shall be avoided or treated prior to disturbance through commuting from the business to other project sites within the lake. And that is all that I have on my statement, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Amer. And again, that will be made part of the public record, and assume it'll be available online likely tomorrow.
Correct. I do have one more thing I'd like to point out, sir. We get this call quite a bit, especially in the summertime as it results from boats and large boat wakes. I'd like to point out that IDL does not and cannot regulate vessels on the lake, such as a barge or a tugboat. We do not have the jurisdiction over that. That's another entity. Just want to make that point known and clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay. With that, I think we've then heard from Department of Lands. Mr. Wickman, I would turn it over to you then for a reply and any closing comments.
Thank you, Hearing Coordinator Bromley. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, you broke up just a little bit there at the beginning, but then it came in. So I think give it a shot and I'll let you know if I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm going to ask John Magnuson to start the rebuttal comments, and we'll tag team a little bit here. We'll try and keep it short.
Okay. Mr. Bromley, my name is John Magnuson, and I am an attorney in Coeur d'Alene. I am here assisting Mr. Wickman this evening. I'm also a lakefront property owner. I'm also a director of the Coeur d'Alene Lakefront Property Owners Association, have been for 20 years. And in my practice, I've litigated the ordinary high water mark and related encroachment issues for approximately 30 years. And so it's old home week to see Jim Brady here tonight. I also, somebody's going to say you live on the lake, you wouldn't want a tugboat at your house. And actually, I do have a tugboat at my house. So at any rate, I think it's important that when you live here a long time and your roots go back, you see as time goes on and the neighborhood changes, how memories fade. And one of the things I don't know about your prior experience with the lake, but it's important to harmonize a lot of these issues that you've heard about tonight, because, we had testimony about Wolf Lodge Creek and Wolf Lodge Bay and pristine environment. And it's really important to look at the lake hydrology just for a moment. And this lake is a flooded river valley that's fed by the Coeur d'Alene River and the St. Joe River to the south. And the outlet is the Spokane River, as you've noted, goes by Coeur d'Alene and goes to Post Falls. In 1906, a dam was put in Post Falls to impound the water by Washington Water Power, now Avista. That dam held the lake level at 2126.5 until World War II during the summer season, now holds it at 2128, the level mentioned by Mr. Brady. The point that's important in terms of that issue with respect to Wolf Lodge Bay is the Wolf Lodge Bay, you hear the testimony about how shallow it is in instances. Wolf Lodge Bay was a hayfield in large part at statehood. I know this for a fact because in litigating the case of Erickson versus State of Idaho, we did a stump sample around every bay of the lake when the water level was down at 2121. And the lowest stump located in Wolf Lodge Bay had a base elevation of 2121.23. So there was terrestrial vegetation growing in many parts of what's now Wolf Lodge Bay. That's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it shows why, in all likelihood, because of topography, we had US Highway 10, which followed portions of the Mullen Trail as it came across the west, and then ultimately became Interstate 90. And then, of course, we have Highway 97 around the other side. But the image is given that Wolf Lodge Bay is a pristine bay, as if it's been unchanged since the beginning of time, and it's pristine in the sense that the northern edge is now bounded by Interstate 94 lanes. The shoreline is anything but native and undisturbed. It's highway right-of-way, incapable in all reality of supporting any sort of vegetation. On the south side, after you go across the east end of the bay, where you'll have a federal interstate interchange, you'll have two lanes that become Highway 97. It's all constructed in the back of what's now a bay, which used to be a hayfield, and then takes the scenic Highway 97, which of course has right-of-way in between it and the lake. So you've got a bay that's entirely bounded by roads, which is why there's no houses there. It's why it appears to be undisturbed. It's simply not developable land, except for very few places, including the one place that Mr. Condon owns, which has, again, people forget, time goes on. I don't forget. I actually ate at the Green Dolphin like one of the call-in people too. The Green Dolphin's permits in the file, it's probably, it's ballpark, and you can compare it. It's an encroachment that's as significant as the one that's proposed here. But what's interesting and important for this purpose is that the ordinary high water mark, Mr. Brady and I have always debated that. He says it's 2128. What actually the Supreme Court held was, in one of the great oxymorons of all time, that the maintenance of a level of the lake for a consistent period of time, as this dam has done now for 114 years, creates the presumption of an ordinary high water mark at 2128, when in fact the ordinary high water mark is by statute defined as uninfluenced by man-made activity. So we've now made an artificial high water mark a presumed ordinary high water mark. Why is that relevant? It's relevant because when you look back at Mr. Wickman's PowerPoint at pages 5 and 6, you'll see a line out in the shore, out in the lake, which Mr. Wickman referenced, which is actually private submerged property owned by the applicant and taxed by Kootenai County. It's recognized by Kootenai County in the state of Idaho as being the property of Mr. Condon, and that has relevance in the sense that when you go back and weigh this evidence and make an appropriate determination, you should look, and I would respectfully say you look at IDAPA 20.02.030.10. And whoever numbered the IDAPA code provisions, we should all have an issue with them. But at that particular provision, it talks about the factors to be utilized in a decision on a commercial encroachment permit. And it says, in recognition of continuing private property ownership of lands lying between the natural or ordinary high water mark and the artificial high water mark, the department shall consider 1, unreasonable adverse effect upon the adjacent neighbor, and 2, undue interference with navigation as the predominant factors. I recognize that you're also tasked with applying the public trust doctrine as an overlaying body of law, but the standards for a commercial application in as atypical a position as this, where the encroachment to a large degree sits on private land now flooded, is governed by that statute. When you apply the public trust, then you will undoubtedly give weight to some of the testimony that you heard earlier about a litany of perceived problems. I echo Mr. Amer's comments that in this particular application, every agency possible with primary oversight, be it Fish and Game, be it DEQ, be it the Idaho Department of Water Resources, Army Corps, BLM, they're all in there. No one has a substantive objection with this encroachment from a governmental agency standpoint that is not significant and it's certainly not against the issuance of the permit. And I say that because we also had Mr. Brady talk about the Idaho Department of Water Resources, and I harken back now full circle to why the ordinary high water mark is important, because when you look at pages 5 and 6 of Mr. Wickman's PowerPoint, you'll see those aerial images, and you'll see Wolf Lodge Creek, and you'll see it because what you actually see is the bed of Wolf Lodge Creek under the bay now, because Wolf Lodge Creek existed in a hayfield before we had a dam. And so when you look at the aerial, you can see what's traversing now. And so if we never had a dam, Idaho Department of Water Resources would have jurisdiction, or certainly claim that, over Wolf Lodge Creek. But now it's not a creek unless we consider an underwater creek a creek, but that's not what it is. It's now under the jurisdiction of the Idaho Department of Lands, which answers these questions when we had, you know, many suggestions about other governmental agencies and entities that weren't performing their oversight authority. That's simply not true, because it's based, unfortunately, upon a misunderstanding of what the actual rules are and what the duties are and what the impacts of this particular project are. So I hope that that has helped place things to some degree in perspective. I frankly, as a resident of the lake, and as not only a resident of the lake, but I tell you, as a service that's offered by North Idaho Maritime, I'm also the partial owner of a couple of marinas, and we utilize those services on a daily basis. We don't have anybody on the lake that has the ability to service those needs with the degree of responsibility and community involvement that they have. It cannot be understated how important this service is to those of us who live and make our living in large degree on the lake. So I ask that it be issued, and I'll turn it back over to Mr. Wickman unless you have some questions.
You know, the only question, I guess, just since you mentioned neighbors, and we've heard a lot of comments from the Harrisons, and if, you know, I don't know whether you have the answers or not, but is this going to be a 24/7 operation during the time when the water is up, when operations can happen? I understand that it's going to be inoperable during low water periods, but you know, your comment to obviously look at the factors, which I need to do, and you specifically reference neighbors, and I've obviously heard quite a bit of testimony from the Harrisons, who are neighbors. Tell me a little bit about the operations that are anticipated.
Well, I will turn that to Mr. Wickman after I answer your question to the best of my ability. And Mr. Wickman and, of course, Mr. Condon will discuss the hours of operation and the months and dates. And I'm sure that what they propose will be certainly something far and afield from 24 hours a day of that nature. But, you know, we did look at that statute, that regulation that I pointed out that said talk about adjacent neighbors. I would note the following. Number one, the adjacent neighbor, as Mr. Wickman indicated, essentially lives 3,000 feet away. Number two, the rules say that if you're more than 25 feet from the common littoral boundary, that it's presumed not to have an adverse impact. And number three, one of the things that we forget here is that although we'd like to look at this bay as a pristine bay, it's hardly, you know, with all due respect to all of the commenters, and everyone has their opinion, but it's hardly a placid, idyllic, tranquil place in large part because you have a 4-lane interstate and an interstate exchange, which the objecting parties note bring thousands, that was their testimony, thousands of cars by them daily. So to suggest that a marine business that would operate during a shortened season of time, they'll tell you the hours and the days, that would be closed for much of the year, and that would be in a scenario that is surrounded by thousands of cars a day, and a commercial campground, which did not object, although the neighbors objected on the commercial campground's behalf. Mr. Ayers is in the record as saying he has no objection. That's why I say there's no impact on the adjacent neighbor. But as terms of impact from hours of operation, I would turn that part over to Mr. Wickman.
So thank you, Mr. Magnuson. I appreciate that. And Mr. Wickman.
Rand Wickman again for the record. Thank you, Hearing Coordinator Bromley. Yeah, just on the hours of operation issue, North Idaho Maritime operates 5 or 6 days a week during the summer. You know, it's only on Saturdays if they're very busy, which is, and it's only during daylight hours. They do not operate nights. They do not operate Sundays. Of course, all that goes out the window in the context of an emergency response. You know, that is, you know, you respond whenever that happens. And so, but as a general business practice, it's 5 or 6 days a week, daylight hours. And so that's that issue. I would address just one more issue, and then I'll hand it over to John, and we'll wrap this thing up. Is the question on the bulkhead. We have not applied for a bulkhead under IDL's jurisdiction. We have applied with Kootenai County for a bulkhead above the ordinary high water mark. It would be set back 2 feet from the high water mark. You know, that is still working through the county's hearing process. But just to be clear about what that is and where that is, that's subject to Kootenai County's jurisdiction and permitting authority. That may or may not be approved, but that's the issue with the bulkhead, and that's why it's not included in this application. And so other than that, I think the other issues are really all upland issues, and I, again, if you had questions about them, we'd answer them. But again, I don't think it'd be a waste of your time. So I'll just pass it over to John then for closing comments. And thank you very much for your patience tonight and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickman.
Thank you, Mr. Bromley. This is John Condon again. Just wanted to clear up a few things that I listened to tonight from the other testimonies. And just to go on record, I want to say this, that Stanley Harrison and his family do not speak for me. And some of those statements that were accredited to me are not accurate. So I wanted to make clear that they don't speak for me and they don't speak for their other neighbors. Their opinions are their own, and the words that come out of my mouth are my words, and they were not accurately shared tonight. The second thing I want to clear up that was brought up about a barge accident. There was no barge accident. It was depicted as a barge accident. It was merely a loading procedure where we were loading riprap material to armor some shoreline that was being degraded on the river. A undisclosed source reported that to the news as a barge accident. It was not, in fact, a barge accident. And that's why I responded in the fashion I did. I was not in operation of the barge. I had 2 veterans in charge of the barge, as they had been for 20 years prior, and conducting business as we had for many, many years, loading in the same material off a spit of land, Blackwell Island. A local person reported that to a news media as a barge accident, and so it got embellished in that way. This issue has been addressed and answered many, many times, and that's why it's particularly egregious to me
that it keeps coming back and represented in the fashion that it has, which is an untruth. So those were two items I thought were worthy of clearing up. And other than that, thank you, unless you have any questions of me.
I don't, Mr. Condon. It broke up just a little bit there. I think you said you really didn't have anything further unless I had any questions.
That is what I said, yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I heard that clearly. I don't have any other questions. That then brings us to the conclusion of the hearing. I do thank everybody who participated for coming tonight, both in person and via Zoom. I have, as I said, I have looked at all of the comments that were submitted up to 5 p.m. Mountain Time today, July 23rd. The ones that have not made their way to me quite yet, I know they will. And as I said before, I will read every comment that has come in. Appreciate the testimony, appreciate the comments. If you had anything in writing that went along in aid of your comments, please make sure to provide that to Lands. We've, given the remote nature of this hearing, are willing to take that up until close of business tomorrow, Friday, July 24th. Please just make sure that you note your name on there and that it was provided in aid of the comment that you provided. You know, certainly want to be accommodating given the remote nature of this hearing. And with that, again, I do appreciate everybody coming tonight, both in person and remotely. And with that, the hearing is closed and we will go off the record. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bromley, this is Chris Gozo. One additional thing, can I ask that the co-hosts stay on so we can do some technical cleanup?
Sure thing. I'm going to drop off, but you're more than willing to stay on and clean up any technical questions.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good. Thank you again, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
You guys did a great job.
Thank you.